I got loyalty, got royalty inside my DNA. I got love, peace, got war and peace inside my DNA. I got joy and pain and joy inside my DNA.
Hello guys, welcome back to my channel The Fanfic Fantasy. Join us as we explore the world of fanfiction and fantasy and bring you the best story and discussions. This is the second part of What If Naruto Ate the Mera no Mai and Got Harem. So give this video a like and subscribe for more videos in future. So let's get into the fanfic. Someday, someone will appear carrying the history of all those decades on his back and challenge the whole world to a fight. The world government fears that immense battle engulfing the entire world that will eventually come. I don't care for such things ... but as soon as someone finds that great treasure ... the entire world will be turned upside down. And someone will find it, because that day will come, sooner or later. Because ... One Piece is real. The last words of Edward Newgate. Dive straight to Fishman Island. She'd given him up, for good this time, or so she feared. Stretched out on cold ship planks, the memory of those grand dreams so alive just moments ago made Jewelry Bonnie once again feel the head of shame at her cheeks and throat. How childish she'd been. What a fool. Most of all, she recalled her idiotic shock, her befuddled, dumb surprise when at the first sound of cannon fire he had turned from her, taken her aside by the arm like a child. I haven't forgotten about our promise, Bonnie, he'd said. It's just that I made him a promise to remember. She hadn't. Bonnie hadn't forgotten either. She'd just been hoping that he had. But he hadn't. His promise to Fire Fist Ace still burned like a brand in the back of his mind, even after all these years. Even so, she'd clung to that foolish hope, the hope that he'd forgotten. But he hadn't her promise either, because she'd seen the pain in his eyes. She'd seen that silent plea in those orbs of sapphire and cerulean, begging her not to make him do this, to not ask him again. And all she'd had to do was ask. She'd seen the look in his eyes, and she'd known that, were she to ask him again to join her crew, he wouldn't be able to refuse her. It would have broken him to turn away from his path, from the promise that had so defined him for the past 2 years. But in the end, he would have relented. Brokenly, he would have murmured his goodbyes to the Straw Hats, apologized to her, and away they would have went. And all because he couldn't bear to refuse her. At least, not for very long. The selfish, greedy part of Jewelry Bonnie might have taken advantage of that once, in spite of her reservations. Back then, she wouldn't have cared. Back then, she would have gladly broken him his spirit if it meant getting what she wanted. Oh, but that had been then. This was now. Now she had a conscience, and she hated the damn thing. Bonnie wanted to rip it out, to remove that vile weed that had grown over her heart and taken root there, slowly sapping her of her ruthlessness until there was none left at all. She'd lost that too, she realized. He'd changed her. Recounting it over and over was almost enough to make her slam her fist against the decking. But she recovered and bit her lip instead, tasting salty blood on her tongue. The pain, at the very least, was nothing when compared to the dull throbbing of her heart. She'd only felt this way once before, when Naruto had asked her to take him to visit the grave of Whitebeard and Fire Fist Ace located on some unknown isle miles away from civilization. That had been the very first time she'd seen Naruto cry. He'd no claim on the former, and although he insisted he wasn't related to the latter, he'd still wept. Just as she wept now. Hot, bitter tears coursed down her cheeks, and yet, though they stung and burned at her lids, though they sapped her strength, she refused to give anyone, let alone herself, the satisfaction of crying out. She took another, long, draught from the sake bottle, wincing as the scalding liquid coursed down her throat and warmed her belly. What a memory that was. Someone will appear to carry on Ace's will. Naruto had spoken sadly to her that day, his eyes somber, his features dour as they stood over the grave together. Someone will appear to avenge his wrongful death at the hands of the world government. Even if they extinguish that bloodline, there's no way that flame will ever burn out, Bonnie. It will always live, and it will never die. Do you know why that is? He'd asked her. She remembered shaking her head. You're not even going to ask. He balked at her, aghast. Well, you're no fun. I'll just have to tell you, then. He raised a hand, his fingers leaving her own, slowly, briefly, as they reached up to caress her visage, bellying a tenderness that made her shudder. She remembered him smiling, his fingers warming her cheek. She remembered, watching the sadness, watching it smolder away and resolve itself into grim determination. What manner of emotions flickered through his face, she'd never know. Whatever it was, he had never bothered to give it voice. Instead, he'd kissed her, softly, slowly, sweetly, driving the confusion to the deepest, darkest corners of her mind. She remembered. She remembered it all, especially the part when he broke apart from her, eyes sparkling with amusement, and said, "Because, like me, there will always be a successor to the will of D. Bonnie." That had been the first and last time she'd ever seen him cry. That day, she had sworn to herself, never again. Never again would she shed tears on the behalf of another. He had always been strong, and she was still weak. The last 2 years had made her stronger in body, but not in mind. She was nothing next to him. She should have known better. She should have known then, as she did know, that he would never break that promise. Had she known the true reason as to why Naruto had broken into Impel Down to begin with, had she known what he was seeking there, then things might have been different. Ah, who am I kidding? Bonnie scoffed at the thought immediately thereafter. Dumbass. She chuckled bitterly. Fucking dumbass. She still would have followed him. Of course she would have. Naruto had offered her an escape, and, like a fool, she'd all but jumped at the chance. Such a fool. Such a lovely, lovelorn fool she was. Perhaps she'd been in love with him all along. Perhaps she'd been the fool for not telling him sooner, for never answering his feelings in kind. Now, she felt herself stirring, stumbling, shaking off the effects of the sake, and swearing profusely as she burst out of her quarters in a flurry of motion. Because, in the end, she could never bear to refuse him, either. Turn this ship around. It was then that a great and gorgeous black flare flung itself across the horizon. Hello. Nami was the first to see the ship. She was the first to recognize the two figures standing at the prow. She was the first to understand the horror of what was happening. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how one looked at it, she wasn't the first to react. Even as she closed the spyglass, Naruto was in motion. Nami blinked as a hand closed around hers, gloved fingers falling, closing around her own for what felt like an eternity, as his breath felt like a kiss on her cheek. Excuse me. Pardon me, Naruto repeated absently, gently taking the telescope from Nami. She felt her cheeks darken with shame as he turned away, peering out toward port and toward the approaching warship. Gods, what was wrong with her today? He hadn't said or done anything special this time, and here she was, blushing like a skittish schoolgirl. It was almost as if, "Don't worry, Nami Swan," Sanji sang, "your prince will protect Yaoyumph." "Shut up, will you?" "Thanks for that," Nami chirped as Sanji's visage crumpled off of Naruto's elbow with the rest of him and slid down to the deck. But Burning Will did not answer. He felt the hairs on the back of his neck rising sharply, prickling with anticipation as he saw the two men standing at the prow of the battleship. Both Kizaru and Akenu had come. Both of them. For him. So the Navy finally saw him as enough of a threat to send 2 admirals after him. Under normal circumstances, such a sight would have been cause for celebration. However, given the circumstance of who was standing next him, Naruto didn't accept this honor with his usual exuberance. "So they've come," he snarled. It was a soft, deadly hiss. "I thought they would, but of all the rotten timing. If Luffy saw Akenu now, ... it was over." "Nami-san," Naruto began slowly, his eyes never leaving looming galleon in the distance. "How long will it take for Sunny to submerge?" Nami paused, considering. "A few minutes at least, if they don't fire on us." Then she frowned. "Wait a second, don't tell me you're thinking of..." Naruto nodded curtly, pleased by her knowing assessment. "I am," he assured her in a hushed tone. "No matter what, don't let Luffy see." "But, you have to promise me you'll do it, Nami-san," Naruto continued. "Give him some meat or something, just keep him distracted for a bit." "You can't possibly expect me to." "I can, and I am. You're being reckless. And you're being an idiot." Naruto rounded on her, moving with a speed that Nami had not thought possible. One moment he'd been focused on the battleship before them, seeing her as little more than a distraction, a hindrance to his objective. The next, smoldering swirls of sapphire and scarlet swelled before her vision, blotting out all else. Belatedly, Nami realized that she was not to blame for Naruto's sudden fury. Luffy was. She saw those orbs of his swerve, stealing a glance toward their captain, gawping at Frankie's awesomeness, still under the delusion that their newest crew member had all but obliterated their opposition, that they were safe, and there was nothing but smooth sailing ahead. "You may have gotten stronger," he snapped, all fire and brimstone. "All of you may have, but none of you are prepared for this." Because Naruto wasn't angry. He was desperate. "That's the man who killed his brother," Naruto hissed, his eyes desperate, his tone fervent, so much so that it gave the navigator pause. "Don't ask me to explain, because I can't. You just have to promise me, please. You can't let him go, Nami-san. You just can't." He leaned forward, the spyglass clattering from his hands as he clasped hers with an urgency so sincere that it caused Nami to blush. What are you? I'm begging you." Unbelievable. He really was desperate. She saw the pain in his eyes as they stole away from Luffy. She saw the anxiety in them. She saw the fierce and furious desire to protect, hidden with those crystal pools of deep, cerulean blue. Nami saw it. Naruto wasn't being selfish. He was being unselfish. The look in those eyes was not one of greed or pride. It was the way an older brother regarded a younger sibling, with care and affection, and a will so intense that it was almost palpable. The will to protect. In that moment, Naruto reminded her of Ace. Strangely enough, and she hadn't even known him all that well. Be sure and take care of my little brother. Those words rang in her head, clear as a clarion bell. All right. Until now, she hadn't given them much thought. Now, however, they came back to her, a great and terrible tide of realization. Those were the very same words of Fire Fist Ace had spoken to them in Alabasta when he'd bid them farewell. Now, those very same eyes, the eyes of his successor, were looking down at her, pleading with her to see reason, to relent and lend him her aid. He'll die if he fights that man, Nami-san. Naruto urged. Please, just do as I ask, just this once. His eyes were those of brother, unrelated by blood or anything so flimsy, forged by a bond so strong that not even death could hope to sever it. Nami had never seen anything like it, not since that day in Alabasta 2 years ago, the day that Fire Fist Ace had bid them his first and last farewell. She remembered it as if it were yesterday, that aloof, carefree smile, that grin that spoke of boundless confidence forged by a life of both hardship and happiness. Naruto had those very same eyes, nonchalant in his confidence and supreme in his desire to succeed. And he was still holding her hands, Nami realized. Why is that I don't mind, all of a sudden. They were warm even through the gloves. They were strong hands too, calloused but not rough, the hands of a man who had worked all his life. They were the hands of a man who wasn't afraid to get those hands dirty. They were the kind of hands that she could imagine holding her, wrapping his arms around her crap. Nami slammed the lid shut on that train of thought before it could escape. Close. He was too damned close. Naruto was standing close enough to her that she could feel the heat radiating off of him in waves, infusing her with warmth and strength, and at the same time, weakening her resolve. He wasn't asking that much of her, surely. She could feel the sweat perspiring upon her brow as he waited, as she considered his proposal. All right. Nami realized that she'd relented and begrudgingly acquiesced that she'd been beaten. For some reason or another, she just could not bring herself to refuse him. Arigato. He smiled then, and it was a smile of such relief that Nami felt her heart flutter. For a moment, it looked as though he might embrace her, such was his glee. Had he done so, she would have welcomed it. Instead, Naruto inclined his head a fraction of an inch and sighed. The smile lessened slowly, his happiness leaching away until only a shadow of it remained. And then, not even that. Just keep him busy for a minute or two. Naruto released her hands abruptly and placed a hand on the bare skin of her left shoulder. And everything will be all right. While it seemed that everything would indeed be so, he might have missed the fact that Nami shivered when he pulled his hand away. If he noticed, then he certainly didn't give any indication of it. How dare you insult Nami-san? Sanji snapped, picking himself up from beneath Naruto's feet. Luffy's not as weak as you. Tell me, do you want him to go to his death? Naruto growled at Sanji. No, didn't think so. Now go, keep yourself busy, or something. Even as the pair turned aside, even as they did whatever they were doing to distract Luffy, Naruto was moving. He put the matter from his mind, counted to 10, and, when he no longer heard the angry protest of their rubberized captain as he was ushered down into the bowels of the ship, Naruto marched onto the deck and summoned the full extent of his power, channeling it to his fingertips, ready to be summoned at a moment's notice. Now, Naruto sighed. It was a soft, whispery sound. Then he reached around for the sheath at his shoulder, his fingers closing around the bundled cloth, unfurling it gently. Without so much as a whisper, Kokushibyo flew free from its bundled sheath. The black blade glinted hungrily in the afternoon light, its slimmed veins of ashen scarlet smoldering like so much the very flames that surrounded its master, flames crying out for blood. Zolo recognized its aura immediately. Then Naruto clapped his hands over his head and his body burst into flame. Power surged through bare steel crackle snap, and outside in the hilt of his blade, a breaker tripped, and all the lights went out except for a shower of gold and blue sparks that cascaded over the ship. Those fireworks lasted only an instant, however, and then darkness claimed the afternoon. Wreathed in a sheath of thin, black flames, the blonde took 3 steps forward, and brought himself to the prow of the ship. There he paused, peering toward the rapidly approaching warship. He lowered his blade arm, its tapered tip scraping across the grassy deck of the Thousand Sunny. He stood, at the ready, and shrugged his shoulders, as though he'd just relieved himself of an incredible burden. He tipped his head up, until he was staring straight into the sky above. Briefly, he closed his eyes and spread his arms wide. "Let us begin." When they snapped open again, they were a blazing, blood black. And not a moment too soon. "Susanoo," he whispered, as if the name explained the calamity surrounding him. He spread the fingers of his free hand wide, and a massive something lanced out at the incoming cannon fire, intercepting the cannonballs before they could hope to breach the Thousand Sunny's defenses. The resulting explosion shook the great galleon to her core. Smoke sprayed across the deck, leaving most of the straw hats coughing on the dust and debris that spread across the ship. Naruto didn't so much as flinch, banishing the fear that curled like a serpent in the pit of his stomach. He pushed himself away from the prow and began to walk. He raised his blade, taking that black obsidian sword and holding it high into the sky. It glistened wetly, pulsating within the flames as it fed upon them and grew stronger. His power fed the katana, and it swelled, made buoyant with energy. Eerily the veins spread across the surface of the blade, throbbing, pulsating with an intention all their own. It was almost as if it were alive, a living entity held captive within the confines of Naruto's sword. Perhaps it was, Zolo mused. Mihawk had told him of this blade once before. He had mentioned it in passing, and with it, a dire warning. The blade was cursed. To wield it was to bring death down upon you, to offer your very life force to the creature housed within the blade's hilt in exchange for its power. Given excessive use, the weapon would use up your life and leave you a pitted, dried husk. Like all blades, it had a story behind it, too. The cursed sword Kokushibyo, Mihawk had explained. One of the most powerful blades in existence, and quite possibly a flawed creation. I know not who created that blade nor the purpose for its forging, save that within that sword was sealed an ancient demon, said to be the harbinger of the world's end, the last known wielder of that weapon, in a final act of spite, tricked a great spirit into taking the shape of his sword as its vessel. Once it had done so, he bound and sealed it within the sword, but not before it took his soul to the underworld, leaving it forever trapped within. It is said that the veins of laid upon the blade are the demon's tears, staining the steel even after all these years of captivity. Is it really that deadly of a blade? Zolo asked dubiously. The silence was deafening. Is it? That would depend entirely upon the wielder, Mihawk acquiesced. But in the wrong hands, such a weapon could destroy society as we know it, or so the legend goes. Then he sighed, waving the matter aside with a flick of his hand. Do not let it distract you, Roronoa. The weapon, if it does exist, is a relic, long since lost to the abyss, and it has not been seen for many an age. Put it forth from your mind, and let us return now to your training. Unbelievable. He was looking at a blade straight out of legend, wielded by a man of fire, whom no sword without the aid of Haki could ever hope to reach. The ultimate weapon, the ultimate challenge, and the ultimate warrior, neatly wrapped up in one voraciously violent package. Oh, and then there was the matter of that bloodthirsty sword of his, was rumored to hold its own sentience. Lovely, absolutely free frickin' lovely. A demon sealed within a sword? Huh. Now that Zolo actually thought about it, it was rather interesting. Imagine the techniques one could glean from such a being. What kind of legendary arts you could master when you had an ageless entity from which to learn. Admittedly, it might not teach you anything at all, considering that it supposedly drained your very life force in exchange for power as opposed to killing you outright. But it was one of the 12 Seijo Owezumano grade blades. To test himself against such a sword would be incredible. Greatly, desperately, intensely, Zolo found himself wanting to test Burning Will's skill with a blade. And why not? It was quite possible that this man was like him, a master swordsman. His choice of weapons spoke for him. Zolo counted each of them. The wakizashi jammed in Burning Will's jacket, a pair of eerily dissimilar katana bound horizontal at his waist, and of course, the blazing blade clasped tight within his scorching grip. That made for a total of 4. Burning Will was a Yantoryu 4-sword wielder. But how did one wield 4 swords? Idly Zoro wondered if Burning Will wielded 4 blades simply because it was widely known that he wielded 3. Wait a second. Would he do that simply out of vanity? Well, his reputation spoke for itself in that regard. Would the man who put Marieoa to the torch and stormed Impel Down really want to showboat any more than he already had? Of course he would. Irked by the prospect of such a thought, Zolo touched his hand to one of the 3 hilts resting at his own waist. TCH. In the end it was quality that counted, not quantity. As if sensing the small amount of killer intent leaking toward him, Naruto turned toward Zoro and cocked his head. He stopped in his tracks, his face slowly appearing over his shoulder as he curiously regarded his fellow Nakama. A look of confused irritation crossed his eye as it regarded the stunned pirate behind him. Is there a problem, Zoro-san? Zoro said nothing. His only response was to neatly slice an incoming volley of cannon fire in halves. They detonated harmlessly away from the Sunny, leaving Naruto to gawp at the sheer strength of the swordsman. Likewise, the rest of the Straw Hats had taken to defending the ship, though why Frankie had yet to release the undersea bag remained to be seen. A fact which Naruto remained very much grateful for. "You don't have to do this," Robin said softly. Suddenly, Naruto turned toward her and found an odd sight awaiting him. Luffy was being tickled half to death by the powers of the Hana Hana no Mai. Such was the reason he had not yet interfered in the defense of the ship. It was almost laughable, no, it was laughable, literally. And he would have laughed too, had not her gaze pinned him to the deck. There was no humor in her gaze, not this time. She knew the like of what he would be facing on the flagship, and she knew that he would likely be facing it alone. Oh, Robin. Fleetingly, longingly, painfully, his gaze locked within her own. She alone knew the depth of what he would be facing. Out of all the Straw Hats, she knew what it was like to be pursued by a Navy admiral, because she'd witnessed it firsthand. She'd been chased ever since she was a child, her every step hounded by Marine and pirate alike. Never had she had peace, never had she had comfort. Only recently, 2 years ago actually, had she found solace amongst the Straw Hats. Now, that nightmare had returned to haunt her tenfold. And, while Robin clearly held no illusions of surrender, she clearly did not approve of the path he was about to take. He knew her too well to expect otherwise. Oddly, it was this that left Naruto smiling. Same old Robin. Sorry, Robin, Naruto muttered, because he daren't say more. If he did, who knew what it would lead to? No, he dare not. This was something he had to do, and he had to do it alone. It was not for pride as she suspected, it was worse than that. Much worse. This was for revenge. He'd attacked Marieoa 2 years ago, not just to free his friend, but in the hope that a certain admiral would come to stop him. He'd stayed behind, and he'd waited for them to send their best as they had at Impel Down. He'd been waiting for them to send Akenu. He'd been certain that he would come, and how could he not? Surely he was still furious over the incident at Impel Down. Surely he would come to finish what he had started that day. He'd been so certain that it would turn out that way, that the world government would send their greatest powerhouse to eliminate the man who murdered the descendants of the 20 kings. Instead, they'd sent Kizaru. He'd beaten him senseless, such was his rage. Why hadn't they sent Akenu? Why hadn't they sent the one who'd murdered Ace? Did they feel that an attack on Marieoa wasn't worthy of his attention? Was that it? Did they deem him unworthy of such a response? Back then he hadn't paused to consider such a possibility. Kizaru had been the threat at present, and Naruto had dealt with him accordingly. But now he had come. Now was Naruto's chance. His first chance and only chance, while the Admiral still underestimated his strength. While he still believed himself to be too powerful to be harmed by an inferior element. While his guard was down, he could be killed. Naruto knew this, and the possibility of avenging the death of Fire Fist Ace thrummed through his heart like an invisible song, beckoning to him, calling him, pressing him onward until the red haze colored his vision and all he saw was the blood of Sakazuki on his hands, and nothing else. "I'm sorry, Ace. I'll keep my promise to you, but for now for now. Now it was time to end it. You don't have to do this." Naruto blinked, drawn from his bloody reverie by a voice. Naruto, suddenly, something moved in his peripherals. Someone stepped forward, placing themselves between him and the open ocean, between him and his goal, between his vengeance and Luffy's own safety. Nico Robin said nothing when he met her gaze with his own. She simply stood there, barring his path. She did not offer an explanation, nor did he demand one. Unspoken words traveled between them in that instant, words that would likely remain unspoken for ages yet to come. His eyes blazed like the sun, while hers shone like the tranquil sea surrounding them. "Please," she whispered, the word laced with so much pain that, for a moment, it gave him pause. But only for a moment. Gently, ever so gently, Naruto pushed past her. "I'm sorry," he repeated, not knowing what else to say. Then his back exploded in a curtain of embers, showering them all with warmth. Naruto smiled, as the great flaming wingspan burst between his shoulders, spreading across the sky in a cacophony of burning orange and gold and red, colors and hues the likes of which could not be described. He stretched them wide, bearing those great and unholy tethers of flight for all the world to see. And he was off. The world stretched before him, an endless expanse of sea and sky as he hurtled through the clouds. He felt the mist striking against his skin, evaporating, becoming currents of steam and vapor as he surged through the sky and toward his supposedly unwitting target. He reared back and clenched his fist, his wings beating harsh and heavy against the clouds, rupturing the skyline as he soared into the heavens. He'd strike from here, he supposed, and sink the ship before either admiral could engage him. It proved to be a mistake. It wasn't long at all before he sensed that something was wrong. In fact, it wasn't long at all before the massive fist of molten magma came hurtling through the fog in that misty sky, ready to grant him eternal rest. Naruto gawped, such was the size of it. Even as large as it was, he hasn't seen it coming. Such was its speed as it rose up beneath him from below, threatening to swallow him up if he gave it the chance. Daifunka. Apparently, Akainu knew he was here, after all. Oh, bugger. Naruto raised his blade, folded the wings against his back, and sent himself, sword and all, hurtling down toward the deck. Kagutsuchi. Black flames swept past the onrushing fist of magma, refusing to meet it head-on as an opponent might have expected. Rather, they aimed for the attacker himself. Startled, Sakazuki pulled back, and the deadly flames sundered instead the sails above, not his visage, as Naruto had intended. He had just enough time to glimpse the look of outrage etched into the Admiral's visage as Akainu realized that his preemptive strike had been foiled. Then it was over, and by then, Naruto had landed. Dropping down upon the warship like a swooping swallow, he greeted Kizaru and Akainu both with the flame. It roared into existence, reaching out with massive hands to take hold of the ship's mainmast with devastating effect, striking straight and true before either admiral could hope to react. And of course, how could they? Their prey had come to take the fight to them. There was no protocol for such an event, so instead they stood there, struggling to recover as neither being foolish enough to stand in the path of debris as they came raining down from the upper decking. Naruto didn't give them the chance to recover. He struck the deck with his fist, plugging his fingers into the rigging before either admiral had the chance to blink. He left it there for a moment, a slow smile spreading across his features as the swell of flames rushed from shoulder to wrist to fist. Then he unleashed it, and sent it hurtling into the stores of gunpowder below. The result, well, it wasn't pleasant, to say the least. Kajero. With a great and rushing whoosh, the ship found itself aflame. Naruto laughed at the disbelief that soured Kizaru's perpetual smile. Akainu was all but boiling, such was his fury at the sudden turnabout. Now, not only could they not face him at their leisure, but, with their own ship burning up beneath them, their chance of escape was limited. Already, the Marines, the lucky ones, were throwing themselves into the water, and a chance few even managed to procure a lifeboat or two, lowering it into the water before the flame consumed them, as well. Naruto ignored them. Let the fools run. He had bigger fish to fry. Starting now, Naruto turned and flung a wall of fire between himself and Akainu. The admiral didn't even blink. Resolute, he stalked forward and through the flames as if they were nothing but kindling to him, his powers rendering him all but impervious to it, passing through the fire and the flames unharmed. And into Naruto's heel. Stars no. Whole planets exploded before Sakazuki's sight. The left side of his face burst into a curtain of violet and indigo hues. He blinked them away, and Naruto reared back before him, seized the lapels of his jacket, and, with every fiber of his being, hurled the hulking admiral over his shoulder and into the ruined stump that was the mainmast. Then, as the admiral bounded back to his feet, Naruto gestured, and a curtain of flaming debris brought the rigging down between them. He took no pleasure from this, small victory though it was. He knew that such petty impediments wouldn't be able to hold the admiral for long, and he was loath to face both two admirals together. All the more important that he ended this before Yasukani no Magatama. Naruto turned his gaze skyward as a sea of blinding jewels swelled before his vision. He stole a glance back toward the Thousand Sunny, pleased to note that the cannons had ceased their bombardment of Luffy's beloved vessel. Good. Just a little longer, then. Just a little while longer. Then he could call off this farce and God willing beat a retreat for fear of accidentally being left behind. But now ... for now. That won't work. He scoffed as the bejeweled lances jolted toward him, scoffed as they lanced through the fire, through him, and scoffed as they obliterated the deck where he stood. The galleon groaned beneath him, the wooden beams protesting against the strain inflicted upon them as they were sundered even further, and yet, miraculously, it held together. He swept forward before it could decide otherwise, the flames spurting from his heels, flickering forth from his fingertips, and bringing him within striking distance of the airborne admiral, much to the latter's surprise. With a furious snarl, Naruto brought Kokushibio crashing down. Hard, Kizaru caught its edge with the tip of his pinky finger. Naruto's eyes bulged. What? Aren't you a little young to be playing the hero, Naruto-kun? Kizaru smiled, sneering as the blonde struggled failed to prevail against the solitary digit stalling him. Stalling us isn't going to get you anywhere, you know. That is, unless you're planning to sacrifice yourself. I could say the same to you. Naruto snapped back, flinging his blade aside and thrusting his arm forward, fingers splayed. Too late, Kizaru saw what he'd been planning. Too late, he felt the boy's fingers close around his chin, his face, his visage, and hold them fast. His fingers closed around Borsellino like a vice and held it fast, clamping around his features with such force that blood welled up at his fingertips. "Gotcha, Soren Sakatsui," Naruto announced smugly to the Admiral's horrified expression, squeezing his fiery fingers into the Admiral's upturned visage, a fiery brand that seared and scorched the flesh. A swell of azure licked across his palm as he spoke the words, sending a surge of pure power arcing down the length of his arm, straight into Borsellino. He felt a pinprick of pain as the Admiral painstakingly pressed a finger into the ball and socket joint of his left arm in a vain attempt to dissuade him from attacking further, but by then, it was too late. Much too late. A lotus of blazing blue fire erupted between the two of them, slamming into Kizaru with such force that he found himself forcibly extricated from Burning Will's grasp. Cold fury burned the entire world white as he crashed to the deck below, the impact of his landing momentarily wedging the Marine Admiral there. Just for a moment. Then he stood up, dusted himself off, and shot upward with such speed that the ship itself cratered beneath him. The sound of laughter above him caused his head to snap up. Uzumaki Naruto had appeared a few feet above Kizaru, flying backwards so as to keep pace with the Admiral only a few feet above him. An already formed geyser of flame swirling within the knuckles of his free hand whilst the other lashed out with the blade. Kizaru raised his forearm into the weapon in an attempt to block, but even as he did so, he realized his mistake. "I was waiting for you to do that," Naruto announced calmly. "Gods, you're just so predictable." For the first time in the fight, Kizaru's face lost its pleasant smile. "Hiken." The infamous supernova grinned sadistically before thrusting his hand forward, the crimson swell raining down on Kizaru with a sonorously low roar. The Marine Admiral threw up his hands to block, but the attack was too well executed, too well timed. Kizaru was sent plummeting back to the ship as the gush of orange flame propelled him to the ship and buried him there in the deck. With a rush of air, the blast sent debris flying in a massive column of smoke and wood as the ship leaned dangerously against the force of the blast. Naruto alighted in a pointed crouch as the dust began to settle, breathing heavily from the continuous assault he'd just participated in. Not only had Kizaru kept on par with him, he'd nearly held the upper hand on numerous occasions. It felt good that he'd actually hit him this time. The undeniable shadow of Borsellino slowly became visible as the airborne debris dissipated. Naruto swore. "That wasn't very nice of you, Naruto-kun," he hissed, gesturing the ruined pile of glass and metal that had been his spectacles. "You went and broke them on me again." Naruto opened his mouth to reply, "Ryusei Kazan," and skipped backwards as massive fist of magma mashed the rail he'd just been standing upon. Another blast was immediately forthcoming, and this one found its target. He kicked off his sandals as the roiling wave of molten death found his feet, nearly losing his toes in the process. It cooled rapidly, leaving little more than a seeping pile of molten slag where he and his sandals had once been. "Yow," he yelped, blowing on his feet. "Hot, that was close. Way too close. There's nowhere for you to run, Burning Will." Akenu snarled as he stalked through the inferno, to stand at Kizaru's side. "Surrender now, and face the consequences of your actions." Naruto blinked, the action of this compounded by a look of such disbelief that it was almost palpable. Then he laughed. Naruto greeted his words with a dry laugh. "You said that last time, if I recall. That's the truth of it," Kizaru drawled lazily, drawing a withering glare from Akenu. "But for a moment there, I thought you'd come to surrender yourself to us, Burning Will." He offered his shoulders in a pitying shrug. "Instead, it looks as though you've come to die, now doesn't it?" Naruto scoffed, and the admirals found themselves amidst the flames once more, but only for a moment, because a new, baleful aura pushed them back. "Gentlemen," Naruto smiled benignly, wrapping himself in a thin sheath of flame. "Whoever said I had any intention of dying? Or perhaps the demonstration just now wasn't enough to jog your memory. Perhaps this will." It was, in essence, a flame. But this went beyond, far beyond what any mere flame could possibly hope to produce. It was not orange, nor red, nor a flimsy yellow. It was not even the dread flame of that Amaterasu, with its soul-consuming surges of death and destruction. This was something more. This was something not of this world, nor of the next. Its very presence took the breath from one's lungs, the light from one's eyes. Such was the terror that its aura inspired. This was something unholy. "You said that's the truth of it, didn't you?" Naruto asked softly. "Let me tell you something about truth. And who are you to claim such a thing?" Akenu interrupted harshly. "The Marines are the true justice here, not you, and certainly not a pirate. Unfortunately, the truth is rarely pleasant, but I prefer to spread the light of wisdom rather than the darkness of ignorance." Naruto shrugged, his shoulders rising and falling with such nonchalance that it sent Akenu's temper blazing. This little pun was mocking him. Even now, cornered as he was, Burning Will still thought he could fight his way out of it, just as he had 2 years before. It was ... it was infuriating. So, you intend to fight to the end, after all? Akainu demanded. That depends, Naruto replied snarkily. Do you intend to let me escape, as you did before? That tore it. Why, you little... Akainu roared, flinging his hand forward. But Kizaru's hand at his shoulder stayed him. You honestly intend to fight the both of us? Kizaru asked, the finest lining of confusion worming its way into his features. Together, alone, isn't that a bit reckless? Naruto did not honor him with a response, at least not of the immediate and verbal sort. Instead, he smiled, dark, dangerous, and deadly. You'd best be on your guard. He spread his arms wide, brandishing the blade as if were a scepter, not an implement of mass destruction. I am more than I was when last we met, Akainu. Much, much more. Allow me to show you the powers I gained over the last 2 years. What you're looking at right now is only the tip of the iceberg. Allow me to show you what my training has acquired. Allow me to show you ... the Susanoo. And as he smiled, the flame solidified, starting as thin wisps of fire. Then it swarmed. The golden blue haze swarmed, parting like the Red Sea as it swept round its master and enveloped him, coating him in a thin sheath of azure saffron. Bone materialized from the nothingness surrounding him. Around and around it curled, birthing the remains of a humanoid upper torso, the beginnings of infrastructure, of some great and terrible creature that existed only in legends. Taking shape, finding form, it reared above him like a coiled serpent, ready to strike at the slightest provocation. A provocation Sakazuki willingly provided. Inugami Guren, Sakazuki bellowed, his arm boiling, swelling at the command, bursting into the distinctive shape of a howling hound. Born entirely of magma, it arched its back and snarled, baring its fangs potently at the ethereal warrior, all that stood between it and its prey. In response, the ghastly ghoul lowered its arms, fingers sprouting forth from the flames, for the protection of its master. A shield burst forth from the limb, snapping into place between Burning Will as the hellhound lunged at him, its slavering maw hanging loose and gaping wide. Useless, useless, useless. Naruto laughed, and let the flames flow around him, taking on new shape, new form, until a wall of bone and fire erected itself between Akainu and himself. And still the dog of death, the hound from hell, surged forth to swallow him whole. Naruto adopted a bracing stance, tensing at the knees and thrusting his right forearm forward. And just as it seemed that the hound would snatch him up in its jaws and devour him whole, Amaterasu, the beast found purchase, but not upon the squishy softness of its intended target. With a mighty grunt, the flaming warrior snapped its arm forward, thrusting its palm, shield and burning and all, into the face of the encroaching canine. With a keening shriek, the Inugami Guren imploded as the black flames scoured it away into nothingness, splattering it like so much gore, raining flecks of flaming debris down upon the deck. Akainu stood askew, his jaw clenched in furious disbelief, veins pulsing against his neck. Naruto smiled and uncrossed his arms, revealing that although the hound had supposedly struck straight and true, it had done little more than burn the bandages wrapping around his arms. Bandages that he now tore away, revealing that intricate tattoo coiling about his arms, the mark of a dragon. That all you got? But the Admiral did not focus on that. Rather, his gaze remained fixated upon the ethereal warrior that loomed over the master of the Mera no Mai, in all his blazing glory, sneering upon him and his supposed triumph. Just what was this abomination? Fire Fist Ace hadn't displayed any of these abilities during the War of the Best, and yet now, his successor bore the full brunt of the Magu Mayan element that should have been superior to his own and stood triumphant. Damn him! Baleful golden eyes leered out from within a sheath of impenetrable armor, sneering down at the Navy Admiral, and the last remnants of his ineffective attack. Naruto raised a hand, and the giant mimicked the motion, its skeletal fingers curling, clenching into a fist. Formed within that fist, a blade of blazing, golden azure proportions could clearly be seen in the haze, held high over the ship's rigging. Naruto grinned wickedly. It okaso, and he dropped it. Without warning, he dropped the blade, and when Naruto dropped the blade, he didn't just drop it. He did not release the handle and allow it to crash to the floor. He did not relinquish the vice that was his hand, from the cloth-wrapped hilt that blazed with the blade of flame. No, when Naruto dropped the blade, he dropped. That was what he did with this weapon. There was no elaborate swinging or sweeping to the side in a graceful arc, as he raised the katana over his head and brought it down. He dropped it and the warship burst beneath them. The great galleon was sundered, split in two with such ease that neither Kizaru or Akainu had the chance to prepare themselves for the impact. One moment they'd been standing upon solid ground. The next, the deck gave way beneath their feet and they were sent plummeting into the ocean. Naruto would have joined them, had not a hand clamped upon his arm and much to his disbelief hauled him backwards and onto one of the severed halves of the galleon before he could recover. Aren't you forgetting something? Naruto turned his gaze upon Kizaru then, or rather, where the brightly colored admiral had once been, blinking in surprise. His eyes widened explosively, and streamed tears of blood as he gazed upon the sudden vacancy. He didn't have any forewarning, and yet, in that same instant, his head dipped to the right, ever so slightly. Seconds later, his eyes experienced a light so intense that it would have blinded him, had he not flung up an arm before his face in defense. Damn it, I'm here too, the admiral replied snarkily, his heel set on an intercept course with the forehead of the dazed blonde. Naruto grimaced and willed the spots away, blinking as the pain swam back and forth in his head as he tried to sort out the cobwebs cobbling his thoughts. Not enough time. There was no way to block, not enough time to dodge, not without sustaining some sort of injury in the process. And with the ship falling apart around them, with Akainu bearing down on him about to take his head off, he wasn't going to make such an attempt. And so, Naruto reached out, blindly, fumbling, searching for some sort of presence, some sort of handhold. And, as luck would have it, he found one. Through the corner of his eye he saw Akainu, clawing his way back up the ship, saw him, as the admiral's eyes narrowed in disbelief, because Burning Will had done the one thing that no one, not even Gold Roger, had ever done before. He'd moved faster than the speed of light. Naruto's hand clamped down around Kizaru's ankle, stopping the admiral's kick cold. Most unwise, Naruto grunted, not bothering to mince words as he crushed the ankle and bone beneath his fingers. Or did you forget that I could use haki? It felt odd to rely on such a trick again. Dissatisfying, really. He'd done this to Kizaru before, and with ease, too. Then, as he did now, Naruto watched as the pain washed all semblance of smugness away from Kizaru's visage. Watched, as horror dawned in the eyes of didn't pause to savor it. However, because Sakazuki never gave him the chance. Even as he tried to fling the light user away, even as he slammed Borsellino face first into the decking and released him, Naruto felt it, the first traces of magma stabbing into his flesh. Mugo. Blue eyes widened explosively as he caught sight of the bubbling arm reared back to strike at his face. He twisted his body to the right, feeling the skin peel from his visage as the broiling appendage passed his face harmlessly by. But he wasn't out of danger yet. Instead of tearing off half of Naruto's face, Akainu rammed that clawed fist directly into another vital area, plunging it into Burning Will's right arm and detonating it explosively. Naruto screamed. Then Akainu's fist found the point of Naruto's shoulder. He wasn't prepared for the laughter that followed, that dark surge of delight. As he looked on, the boy's arm reached up, ignoring his wound to clamp over Akainu's forearm. Impossible. Akainu gawped as his magma tried, and failed to smother the flames surrounding Burning Will. Instead, the tables were turned. Black flames, shadowy wisps the like of which he'd never seen clung to the magma, where it had scalded away most of Naruto's shoulder. Slowly, inexorably, they crept across the tether of magma tying them together, latching onto Sakazuki with a mind-numbing intensity. With horror dawning in his eyes, with the first vestiges of pain crumpling the outer corners of his mind, Akainu saw and he understood the truth of what had just occurred. He hadn't struck the boy's flesh after all. Not completely, at least. Surprised, Naruto gasped through gritted teeth. You're not the only one with an ace up your sleeve, eh, Sakazuki? A pause, a devil-may-care flicker of amusement flitting a moment across his features. Of course, I don't have any sleeves, but then again, neither does the Amaterasu. Akainu seethed helplessly as his voice droned on, growing stronger with every syllable. Amaterasu. Whatever this Amaterasu was, Naruto had deliberately coated his entire body with it, forcing the Inkai black flame to act as a buffer against the magma while he burned within its tempestuous grasp. And, try as it might, the awesome powers of the Magu Magu no Mai could not hope to prevail against it. In turn, the hellish flame devoured them, crawling and creeping and crackling across the flesh of its master, leaving him writhing in agony, badly burned, scarred, perhaps, but by no means incapacitated. And through the pain, through the all-consuming blackness that threatened to blot out his vision and drive him under, Naruto brought his blade over and down, severing Akainu's arm. That had been the intention. He'd simply intended to hack himself free. He hadn't really been aiming at anything, or so he supposed. Instead, imagine his surprise when Kokushibio sliced through the Admiral's wrist as though it were naught but butter, removing the boiling appendage in a single sweep. Gyrgh. The howl that escaped Akainu was a lament for all that he had failed to do, and all that he now knew he would never do. Naruto threw the arm away, the motion dislodging the magma from his shoulder. He struck again, opening a rent in Akainu's other arm and nearly splitting the side of the doomed admiral's head. Akainu staggered. Naruto swung from the side, the haki-imbued blow biting deep into Sakazuki's magma, deep into his waist. "It's over, Akainu," he hissed, the words darkened, edged with malice, barely burbled beneath the all-consuming haze that threatened to swallow him up at any moment. "You had better hope Vegapunk can grow you a new arm, because believe me, you're going to need it." Naruto twisted the blade within the wound and held it there relishing as the Admiral's visage scrunched up in pain. This was what he had come here for. This was his just due. This was the long-awaited reckoning that Akainu had brought upon himself the day he'd murdered Fire Fist Ace. This was justice, not the paltry, self-serving kind that those Marines so soullessly invoked. Oh no. This was divine retribution, brought about by the only hand that could stand to harm Sakazuki and emerge, relatively unscathed. No one had expected it to end this way. Not the Gorosei, not the world government, not the Marines, and certainly not Sakazuki. Naruto shoved the sword through marrow and into bone still, burying it to the hilt with an almost malignant glee. Surely Ace was smiling. Surely Luffy's brother was looking down from heaven and smiling down upon the hand of judgment that had dealt Akainu a crippling if not career-ending blow. With this instrument of vengeance, Naruto yanked the katana free and Akainu sank to his knees. He lifted his remaining arm to ward of the next blow, and Naruto struck at it with his foot. He hadn't the strength left to swing the blade but once more. Disarmed, he fell to the deck, collapsing in a rapidly enlarging pool of his own blood. Naruto loomed over him a moment longer, warring with the desire and compulsion to finish him off, wrestling with the sudden, niggling sensation that he'd forgotten about someone. Ama no Mirakumo. Behind, Naruto rounded on Kizaru with a hiss, his sword crashing against the Admiral's, a veritable bar of golden, glinting light. Flames lashed against that light and his vision swooned in and out of focus as he struggled to maintain control. Damn it all. Despite having the somewhat negligible disadvantage of a sprained ankle, Borsellino had somehow managed to outmaneuver and flank him, and, for a moment, it was almost enough. "How long do you think you can last with those wounds, nay, Naruto-kun?" Kizaru mocked him with that all-leering smile as he pressed down with his blade. "Not much longer, I'd say, him." He leaned closer, forcing the blunt edge of Naruto's weapon closer and closer to his face. Sweat beaded upon his brow as Burning Will pushed back with everything he had. It wasn't enough. For a split second, his knees buckled. For a second, for an instant, for an eternity, what little strength he had threatened to desert him entirely. Then Naruto flung out his free hand and tightened the blood-stained fingers of that hand into a fist. Before Kizaru could hope to react, the Susanoo reached down for him. Before he had the chance to dodge, before he could think to merely phase away, the fist slammed shut around his arms and bound them to his waist. He prepared to end it, to bring those bony fingers together as one would their own, and squeeze Kizaru like an overripe grape. He tried to, but instead, lightning arced down his spine, followed by pain. A deep, searing, all-consuming pain, emanating from just over his heart. No, not now. He'd gone on too long. He'd exhausted his stamina and overused the flames of the Amaterasu. If he used it again, if he continued this excessive use of the Susanoo, then he risked diminishing his own lifespan. He'd worn enough of that away already in the past. He needed what precious little he had left to continue his voyage. But he couldn't just let Kizaru go. If he did that, then he'd never have this chance again. If he released Borsellino now, then the Admirals would only continue to hound him. Heck, they might even send all three of them next time. And he'd barely managed to defeat two. He couldn't let this opportunity escape him, no matter the cost. Bracing himself for the worst, Naruto began to squeeze. Tikiri no Mai. Naruto detected a flash of something sharp and silver in his peripherals, and then, abruptly, he was airborne. It felt as though the world moved out from under him, sucking all the air with it. The blade fell from his hand, and suddenly, he was flying. His head snapped forward and the wind boiled around him. The air itself seemed to hurt, he was moving so fast. The ruined flagship and with it Kizaru and Akainu receded into the distance with uncanny speed. How far he'd been pushed, he couldn't tell. It seemed to last forever, but he knew he had to hit the ground sometime. Oh, he hoped it would be soon. His body ached in every pore and it was only with great difficulty that he managed to quell the flames that still simmered from his skin, that he was able to recall the blade back to himself. Wetly and mostly intact, the blackened blade smacked into his palm as he flew, and he forced his fingers to curl about it. He couldn't afford to lose this blade. Not after the promise he'd made, not after all he'd gone through to get at it. But landing was going to hurt. It did hurt. He was dimly aware of a hand clamping upon his shoulder as the forces propelling him began to slow. There was a sharp snap crack then. Instead of being pushed, as before, Burning Will found himself yanked backwards with such force that it dislocated his shoulder. Ouch. Whomever had him must have used Haki to make certain that they had the proper handhold on his otherwise intangible form. And for that, he was most grateful. Good old Luffy. His back collided with something hard, the mast, perhaps, and he groaned. Whomever had first launched him from the warship hadn't exactly been gentle about it. Then again, neither had Luffy. Then he fell forward onto the deck. Nice catch, Luffy. Usopp laughed. Don't let them escape, yelled Admiral Kizaru. Yet Admiral Akainu, wounded though he was already preparing his attack on the Thousand Sunny. Charging his attack, Akainu yelled Great Eruption. Joining in, Admiral Kizaru was in midair and used his own attack, the Yasukani no Magatama, sending countless deadly light attacks down toward the Thousand Sunny. Yet they were both too late. A wall of fire, black fire erupted between their techniques and the vessel as it activated its coating technology, the one which Silver's Rayleigh had equipped it with 2 years prior. Magma and light, both were rendered ineffective before the blackened barrier, which, brief though it was, had bought the ship enough time to sink beneath the waves and be lost from sight. Within seconds, the ship was completely surrounded by a bubble-like force field, sinking deeper into the water's abyss with every passing second. Standing upon the ruined wreckage of the flagship, the admirals could do naught but watch as the Straw Hat flag sank below the waves. And then, that too was lost, as was the rest of the ship. The Straw Hats had escaped. Damn it all to hell, Akainu roared in disgust. They got away. At least we know where they're heading, said Kizaru. We might be able to cut them off on the other side of the continent once they leave Fishman Island. That's not the point, Borsellino, snapped Akainu. We should have been here quickly to make sure Straw Hat Luffy and Burning Will Uzumaki did not escape us. He winced as the stump of his arm throbbed angrily with that of his pulse. That they'd been defeated went without saying, and was left unsaid. And the irony of it all, Burning Will's bounty was only going to increase from this once word got out. The first man to kill a Tenryubito was also the first man to single-handedly defeat 2 admirals. 2, by himself. It was humiliating, infuriating. It should not have been possible. It was the greatest embarrassment the world government had ever suffered in its entire lifetime, and it was only going to get worse, Kizaru realized, as he helped his fellow admiral off the wreckage of the warship and into a lifeboat. Oh yes, little did he know, just to what extent, how bad this day was going to be. Kizaru knew how badly Akainu wanted to capture the 2 pirates. Due to Luffy being the son of the revolutionary dragon, Akainu viewed him as the most dangerous threat to the world, along with Fire Fist Ace. During the Battle of Marineford, in order to ensure Luffy's destruction, the admiral had pierced through Jin, straight to Luffy, whom he was carrying after he underwent mental shock upon seeing his brother dead. Everyone was sure that Luffy could not survive that attack, and yet they were wrong. Kizaru was also aware of Akainu's raging grudge against Burning Will Uzumaki de Naruto. Many months ago, Akainu had captured Naruto and transferred him to Impel Down. Naruto had been sent to level 1, Crimson Hell due of his bounty being a meager $21 million. However, it turned out to be a complete trick. Naruto had faked his capture in order to get himself inside Impel Down. And to make matter worse, he was a Loja Devil Fruit user, successor of Mera no Mai, something nobody knew until it was too late. No one knew why, but he fought his way level 6, Eternal Hell. It was discovered that the reason Naruto had gone to level 6 was to see Hidden. Hidden had been the leader of the Brotherhood of Kami, a pirate crew of religious fanatics who believed it's their duty from God to overthrow the world government. It is unknown what discussion was held between the two, but it had something to do with a girl named I Am. Strangely, Naruto left Hidden in his cell, but decided to free Jewelry Bonnie and her crew. Akainu, learning of this catastrophe, quickly returned to Impel Down to stop Naruto and the havoc he had created. However, Naruto had outsmarted the admiral brilliantly so and stolen his personal ship. When Akainu attempted to follow, Naruto simply burned his ship out from underneath the admiral before he could catch up to the escapees. Akainu would have drowned had he not clung to the wreckage like a frightened child before being picked up by another ship amidst a horde of raging Sea Kings. It was the biggest embarrassment Akainu had suffered, and personally, he blamed Naruto for it. The boy purposely fools him by allowing himself to capture and made it look like he was a weak pirate. The image of Naruto's twisted smile of mockery served only to fan the flames of the admiral's inner rage and determination to capture the blonde troublemaker, and with him, his captain, Monkey D. Luffy. You will not get away with this, Burning Will, Akainu growled. I swear it. Yes, Sakazuki, Kizaru sighed, palming his singed visage. Of course he won't get away with it. And so he sat in undignified silence as they were rowed back to Shabondi. They were not attacked by a Seeking, though he'd have gladly welcomed the chance to kill something, but upon their eventual arrival on the island, they were in for yet another surprise. Waiting for them was a ship of massive proportions, pulled by 2 massive sea serpents. The great galleon cruised through the waters of the archipelago, lowering a sloop for them. The meaning behind such a gesture was obvious. As they disembarked, both admirals realized that they were not alone. There, waiting for them, her face soured by disapproval, was none other the most beautiful woman in the world, and only female member of the Oka Shichibukai, Boa Hancock. To make matters even more perplexing, she was engaged in a heated debate with none other than Sentomaru, whom she had conveniently picked up some time prior to arriving on the scene. That the two were surrounded by a ring of heavily armed Kyuja pirates made the scene all the more imposing. Like I already told you, Sentomaru explained to Hancock, the situation was insurmountable. The man who stopped us was the Dark King, the same man who once stopped Uncle Kizaru in his tracks. What was I supposed to do against that? What's more, Burning Will is apparently that man's grandson. He paid no attention to the sudden pall that fell over the pirate empress and her sisters, instead pressing onward to make matters worse. He was last seen fleeing Shabondi with Monkey D. Luffy and his crew, though I can't be sure why he would do such a thing. Just a moment. Just now, Hancock began slowly, forcing the words through numbed lips. What did you say to me just now? I said he joined the Straw Hats. Sentomaru repeated his previous statement and left Sabayati. Before that, Hancock snapped. What did you say to me before that? I said that Burning Will is the grandson of Silver's Rayleigh. Sentomaru grumbled. Telling me to say it again won't change anything. What proof do you have of this? Hancock demanded, feeling as though ice water had just been poured into her veins. This could not be. It could not possibly. If Burning Will, if Uzumaki Naruto, truly was the grandson of the Dark King, of the man who had sheltered her and her sisters, then she'd made a terrible mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake that she had no way to rectify, should she ever see him again. The Dark King said it himself, and Burning Will acknowledged his word. Sentomaru threw up his hands in exasperation. Every marine here can personally testify to that. Boa Hancock, as can a number of these pirates. Gods, what more proof do you want? But Hancock wasn't listening. She could see it in the eyes of her sisters, the shock, the horror, the disbelief. Rayleigh actually had a grandson. Oh, but this changed things. If Burning Will truly shared blood with Silver's Rayleigh, then she owed this man a debt. Suddenly, Hinata and Ino's report made sense. It made perfect sense. If Uzumaki Naruto truly was the grandchild of the legendary Dark King Silver's Rayleigh, who had once rumor had it lost a lover to slavers, then why not bear such a hatred towards slavery itself? His recent actions certainly demonstrated that in spades. Ever since yesterday, the day in which Uzumaki Naruto had first set foot on Shabondi, the day in which he had single-handedly broken up the slaving ring around the shipyard coating, slavery had all but ground to a halt on the archipelago. Her sources had also reported that the world nobles famed for their lovery of such slaves were nowhere to be found upon the archipelago after that raging and righteous event. Strange, it was almost as if the slavers were afraid to sell and the Tenryubito wary to buy, for fear of bringing the burning demon down on their heads. Burning Will was not known for his leniency in that regard, after all. The prospect of summoning his wrath was simply too great for even the most impertinent of slaver to ignore. And yet his actions of such renown, of mercy towards slaves and spite towards slavers, reminded Hancock of someone else, someone who had once freed her and her sisters from their own bonds of servitude. Fisher Tiger. Oh dear. Burning Will reminded her a great deal of Fisher Tiger. Granted, he was not a fishman, and, granted, he possessed the powers of the Mera no Mai. But in Hancock's mind, this was where the distinction ended. Here was a man who loathed slavery, who despised it to his very core, who raged against it every day, wherever he went. This was not a man of the kind that she knew. This was a man of righteousness and fortitude, of justice. And she'd thought that this man was after Luffy. What a fool she'd been. What a Boa Hancock. Akenu felt his anger abate somewhat as he caught sight of the infamous pirate empress. What are you doing here? I'm rather surprised myself, Kizaru added as he drew up alongside his fellow admiral. I was under the impression that the Kyuja pirates didn't travel this far north. Hancock didn't have to feign shock this time, because this time it was genuine. They were wounded, she realized. The both of them. She'd been wise not to interfere after all. If she had, then she might have made matters even worse for Luffy. Thank goodness he'd managed to escape. Still, there was the matter of explaining her presence here to the world government. Hancock frowned. With two admirals standing before her and both demanding answerment, there was nothing left for her to do but follow through on her lie and hope that her statement would hold up under scrutiny. It was true enough. Her original intention after seeing Luffy off had been to prevent Burning Will from harming him. Now, the subject was moot in point, but she opted to persist, regardless of the danger that she might place herself in. I came here in pursuit of Burning Will. Hancock lied. He attacked my island several months ago when I managed to trace him to this location. She allowed a self-depreciating smile to curl the corners of her lips to that effect, furthering the deception. From what Officer Sentomaru has told me of our opponent, my aid would have been negligible at best, given that Silver's Rayleigh personally stepped in to ensure his grandson's departure. Hancock hid the true depth of her satisfaction as she watched the words ripple over each admiral, watched them absorb their meaning and the implications behind it. Let them chew on that a while. She let the statement hang, unadorned between the three of them. She let it smolder and simmer and spit in Akanu's purpling face, because the admiral's fury was suddenly redoubled in the wake of this sudden news flash. His grandson. Akanu barely managed to squeeze the words out around a scowl. You mean to tell me that Burning Will ... is the grandson of the Dark King? That's what I've been saying. Sentomaru sighed loudly, his expression turning dire soon thereafter as he finally noticed the extent of the wounds that both admirals bore. I don't understand. Didn't you manage to defeat him, Uncle Kizaru? Borsellino grimaced and scratched at the back of his head. Sakazuki said nothing, but his silence spoke for him, and it spoke volumes, as his good hand crumpled around the ruined remnants of his wrist. Well, Sentomaru pressed, obviously assuming that both admirals had triumphed. He is dead, isn't he? Not exactly. Kizaru took one look at his fellow admiral and wisely decided to broach the subject at a later date. Well, but what about the rest of the pirates? Did you capture them all, Sentomaru? Sentomaru shook his head. Not all of them. The Caribou brothers, along with a number of fake Straw Hats, managed to escape. And the rest? All the rest of the offenders have been apprehended. But the real Straw Hats have dealt severe damage to 3 of the pacifistas. The units were prototypes, the same ones that cornered the Straw Hats 2 years ago. Their strength, of course, was the same as back then. It's the Straw Hats themselves that have changed. The level of growth they displayed after these 2 years in hiding is nothing short of incredible. You'd better make this nice and clear to Marine headquarters. The Straw Hat pirates are at large once more. Aokiji isn't going to like that. Kizaru amended. The world is in an uproar already. If they think that we admirals can be defeated so easily, there's sure to be more trouble on the horizon, that's for sure. Well, you're right about. Get me a den mushi. Akenu bellowed, the suddenness of his command causing both Kizaru and Sentomaru to jump. I'm putting in a call to the Gorosei, and calling the entirety of our forces together to intercept the Straw Hats in the New World. We'll summon everyone. All of them, including ... her. Borsellino balked at the mention of her. Surely, Sakazuki wasn't thinking of summoning her to the battlefield. She, admiral though she was, had been expressively forbidden from pursuing Burning Will, despite her delirious desire to hunt down the supernova and kill him. If she was allowed, if she was actually allowed to join them in their mission to destroy the last remnant of Gold Roger's era. ... Oh, this wasn't going to be pretty. Now, Sakazuki-san, Borsellino began nervously. There's no need to be hasty. I did not ask for your opinion, Borsellino. Akenu thundered. Someone, get me that damned snail phone before I tear this ship apart to find it. This was met with little enthusiasm from the Kuja pirates, least of all Boa Hancock. They were, after all, guests on the Pirate Empress's ship. I would thank you not to destroy my ship. Hancock supplied tersely. We will supply you with a den mushi if you so need one. But in exchange, I'll ask that the 3 of you leave us in peace, not pieces. Now, if you'd be so kind. But of course, Kizaru replied all too cheerily, secretly grateful for any excuse to depart. We need to go back to Shabondi and see to the rest of our men anyway, now don't we? Sentomaru, you have our thanks for your assistance, Boa Hancock. Sentomaru swiftly nodded his assent to this, also glad to be away from the volcanic Akinu, lest he somehow bring a torrent of magma raining down on their heads. As they departed, Hancock fought back a blush. Rayleigh's grandson, despite herself, despite all the chaos surrounding her, the great Pirate Empress, fought back a blush. I think I'd rather like to meet him someday. Meanwhile, on a hill overlooking the sea, gone in the blink of an eye, Shaki stood, sighed, and took a long, hard pull of her cigarette. Monkey-chan and all the others have become so strong now, haven't they? You were watching? Rayleigh asked from where he sat beside her. Of course, Shaki smiled. And their fan, remember, right? Rayleigh nodded absently, his eyes distant. Are you remembering something, perhaps, Ray-san? Shaki asked. Rayleigh blinked, drawn from his reverie by the words of his wife. Did you say something? You were thinking of Roger just now, weren't you? She prodded playfully. I was. Rayleigh relented. But I was also thinking of someone else. His eyes misted over slightly as he thought of it. Here, on this very hillock, he'd bid his son farewell. It is rather fitting, he mused, that I see my grandson off in the same fashion as his father. It made him think back to that day when he'd first learned of Naruto's existence. Now, that had been a shocker. Well now, to what do I owe the pleasure of your visit? Rayleigh smiled at the figure standing before him, his shoulders propped against the door jamb upon which he rested. Whomever this man was, he had taken great pains to conceal his identity. He stood in the shadows, his face hidden within the deep folds of a cowl, as dark and mysterious as one could ever hope to be. Whatever this man wore was hidden well within a matte black cloak, exposing only the light leather sandals and black, fingerless gloves he wore, and he seemed reluctant to reveal even those. Even his face was hidden, save for an unusually bright shard of sunlight shining down between them. He was nameless, and yet the shared smile between the two men spoke volumes. So what brings you here, son? Rayleigh asked, sipping at his glass absently. I take Kushina's been well. She sends her love. Such a lovely daughter-in-law, that one. Rayleigh laughed. But I'm sure you didn't come here just to tell me about your lovely wife now, did you? The man shook his head sternly. I thought I should be the first one to tell you. Tell me what, Minato? Minato Yellow Flash Namikaze smiled. He was a handsome fellow, if intense. His blonde hair was disheveled, his blue eyes intelligent, his features balanced. One might even have thought he were Naruto, were it not for the astounding lack of whiskers on his cheeks. Cheeks that usually dimpled with a constantly bright and enthused grin, no matter the situation, no matter the peril. But, at the moment, he was intense. His face had hardened, his visage filled both with tension, and something else that Rayleigh couldn't quite discern. Chiseled and lacking any sort of expression. That face slackened, those lips bearing upward in a smile so abrupt and filled with such warmth that it served to dull the weight of the words behind it. Congratulations. A new voice joined with Minato's as he spoke, as he stepped aside and made way for it. This one belonging to that of a young woman. Beautiful brown eyes, framed by long, silken crimson tresses. Kushina smiled, and stepped into view, and it was within her smile and within her stomach that Rayleigh both saw and sensed the truth of their words. You're going to be a grandfather. That was the last time I saw him. Rayleigh tipped his glass back and sighed deeply at the memory. That had been years ago, before both Minato and Kushina mysteriously vanished at sea, never to be seen or heard from again. And so, little Naruto had been left to be raised not by his grandfather, but, instead, by his godfather and godmother, their small isle comprising the entirety of the boy's life, until that fateful day. That day, the day on which Fire Fist Ace first set foot on that shore. Do you miss him? Shaki asked, lowering the cigarette from her lips. Rayleigh didn't have to ask to whom she was referring. He already knew. Did he miss Minato? Yes, he did, and terribly so. Even he, the great Dark King, had no knowledge of his son's whereabouts, let alone those of his wife, whether they were alive or dead, even. Would that he knew, would that he could tell his grandson what to look forward to in the new world. But it was not to be. If Minato and Kushina were indeed alive, then they were surely waiting for their son, who so desperately believed them to be in the new world. If not, it may just be that there is no such thing as coincidence in this world. He mulled it over softly, as though it was always meant to be. Mysterious bonds slowly but surely weave their forms. At any rate, Luffy has taken another step towards becoming a man worthy of that hat he wears. With Naruto by his side, he's likely to yet take many, many more. Those boys ... make me feel like living on for a while longer. As he watched the last of the sunny submerge, shielded by the tide of black flames, he tipped his glass in a stoic farewell. Naruto ... luffy ... both of you, turn this world upside down. Even further away, Shabondi Lawless Zone. In the remnants of Grove 46, a pile of ooze twitched. The greenish liquid slowly slithered across the grass, hissing and sizzling wherever the sunlight touched it. It clambered, clawed, and crawled its way past the mighty roots of the Yukumaran mangroves, moaning, groaning, slurping forth from the soil as it struggled to find some semblance of shape and form. Eventually it did. Frothing and spitting, a face emerged from within the brownish-green muck, a face that should have perished in the flames of judgment. Oh, it groaned, gasping and gargling on its own fluids. Oh, he'll pay for this. Arms sprouted where there had been none, gaining deep sleeves through which human fingers stretched. A torso emerged from the greenish goop, sliding into place beneath a chest that hadn't existed in the moving marsh a moment ago. Fully clothed legs, followed by pointy-shoed feet, seeped out of the legless torso. Last, but not least, a wet-haired head popped into existence, bearing rimmed eyes and a mouth with a long, lizard-like tongue, and a voice as wild and wicked as the swamp itself. "Revenge," he cackled. "I'll have my revenge yet. First on those fake straw hats, but, more importantly, on you. Burning Will, you haven't seen the last of me. I swear it. Just you wait, you ... you do-gooder you. I'll chase you to the ends of the earth. I'll crush you, your loved ones, and all you hold dear. Kahahihi. Just you wait." Caribou had survived. Naturally, he was furious. Burning Will ... this isn't over. Back with the Thousand Sunny. As the Thousand Sunny sank into the abyss, unknowing of the threat that lurked above, all was not well. Already, all was not well. Instead of marveling at the marvelous sights as they sank deep through the waters, instead of being awed by the coding technology with which Rayleigh had equipped their ship, instead of being their usual, off-the-wall belligerent selves, Luffy and the Straw Hats remained fixated on something else entirely. The fate of their newest crewmate and nakama, Uzumaki D. Naruto. Is he going to be alright? Nami was the first to ask. Chopper emerged from the cabin. All eyes turned toward the human-reindeer hybrid, each expecting an answer. After an eternity of silence, the reindeer brushed the sweat from his brow and exhaled heavily. The silence hung over them like a noose until everyone choked on it. And still there did it hang, an invisible vice slowly tightening around their throats, constricting their hopes with every passing second. Finally, someone severed that noose. "He's fine," replied Tony Chopper. "He's sleeping right now. It's nothing serious, but it's best that he gets some rest." Everyone, even Sanji, seemed to deflate somewhat as they each received the news, knowing that their newest crew member was not in as dire straits as they had initially assumed. While this was indeed good news, it remained to be seen what had caused the sudden illness of their new nakama. Why did his eyes bleed and why did he vomit blood like that back there? Luffy asked in confusion. Is he sick or something? He probably got it from Hat Dumb Cook there, Zolo pointed out. He's been getting repeated nosebleeds all the time. I hope you didn't bring back anything contagious. Hey, shut up. Sanji snapped back at the swordsman. I think it has something to do with the black fire, said Robin quietly, the concern of her words drawing all eyes unto her. He used those black flames called Amaterasu to stop the volcano magma from following us. Perhaps it had some sort of after effect on him. Yo ho ho ho. Brooke couldn't help but laugh. It was a most impressive display, after all. Hey, I think you might be right, said Frankie, recalling his own deadly encounter with the flames as Chopper returned to the cabin to tend his patient and his wounds. Still, flashback. Hold it. Say, you wouldn't happen to know where Luffy is, would you, Frankie-san? Nope, Frankie answered stiffly. Usopp and Sanji have been here already. Usopp's out to get fuel, and Sanji's stocking us up on fuel. Whoever, he drawled angrily, something's been bothering me for a while now. You keep telling us you're burning Will, but you keep asking for Luffy. How do we know you're not some sort of government spy or something? Frankie, Robin began, that's more than enough. So you doubt me, Naruto wasn't having any of it. Squaring his jaw, he took a small step forward. You doubt what you've been told then, Frankie. As if, Frankie growled, I just don't trust you. I knew it. Naruto fired back. Then that means you don't trust Robin, either, and more than willing to take Nico Robin at her word. Frankie retorted, put on the defensive by the blonde's explosive retort. However, just because she says you are who I think you are, doesn't guarantee you're the real deal. Amaterasu. Naruto summoned the flames back to the surface of his skin, welcoming the warmth they brought with them. They devoured the arms of his cloak with tongues of black flame and then the rest of it, exposing heavily bandaged forearms, the like of which were laced with strange black markings, barely seen beneath the bandages. With the destruction of his cloak, everything about him was revealed, as were the bulky protustions that had been bound to his back. He was a spiky blonde young man with fox-like whiskers, sapphiric blue eyes, very handsome in addition. He was very tall, with an athletic outline. He was wearing an orange sleeveless coat, black short-sleeve shirt and pants, red gloves and boots. He was carrying two swords behind him, one a katana, the other a wakizashi, both of which now wreathed in flame with their master. He glowered and Frankie trembled. He tried to turn his head and found it locked in place. He tried to close his eyes and found he couldn't blink. Naruto smiled and, careful to keep the flames from the deck, spread his hands outward, a small demonstration compared to the true depth of his power. The flames glazed across the mast, the deck, even the sails, but they did not burn because he willed it to be so. As always, it was intoxicating. Adorned with fire and brimstone, his flesh writhing with layer on layer of flame, thorns of it crawling out of his skin, a black crown of it springing through the skin of his head. Naruto was eerily aware of the enchanted looks the resurgence of his given element had brought. Frankie looked as if he'd just busted a cog. Likewise, Robin's expression was equally stunned. But even as he looked on, her surprise began melting, molding into something else, something he daren't give thought to. No, he forced his emotions back down. Now is not the time. No. Willfully, he banished the flames from his body. Satisfied, he asked Frankie, folding his legs and dropping into a squat between the two of them. The last of the flames spurted from his body and dissipated, turning to quiet ash upon the deck. And then they too were gone into the afternoon. Because I won't be doing that again. A strange flickering of relief flitted across his face, and then it was gone, fluttering away from his eyes with the ashen remnants of the flame. End of flashback. I didn't think those black flames were hurting him, said Frankie. He didn't look like he was in pain before. He doesn't show his pain well, Robin insisted. It probably just took some time to affect him, that's all. You sounded awfully confident there. Zolo frowned. Why is that? What? You said he doesn't show his pain well just now, didn't you? Zolo pointed out sternly, rising into a standing position. How is it that you knew that and we didn't, Robin? If this perturbed Luffy, he did little to show it. Dumbfounded, he scratched at the back of his head and said nothing. Likewise, this announcement was met with similar disbelief by the rest of the crew, each of them regarding Nico Robin with varying looks of confusion and skepticism. Come to think of it, you did say you knew him when you vouched for him. Usopp began warily. I remember when Luffy and I first met him, but did the two of you know each other before that or something? No, Robin began, raising her hands pleadingly. That's not it at all. You see, Oi, Sanji snapped abruptly, interrupting whatever Robin might have said. Robin Ch-Wan doesn't have to say anything if she doesn't want to. So stop harassing Robin Ch-Wan, Usopp. Then he rounded on Zoro, and especially you, Baka Marimo. What was that supposed to mean, idiot cook? Zolo flicked open of his 3 swords, eye twitching. You wanna go? Huh? Sanji retorted, lifting his left leg threateningly at the knee. Just try me. I'll show you the strength I gained by risking life and LMB for 2 years in hell. Quiet, the both of you. Nami hissed. Gods, he's sleeping for the love of. Hey, Chopper protested suddenly, his loud shout muffled from within the inside of the Sunny. What are you doing? You're not supposed to be out of bed yet. A loud crash exemplified his cry of dismay, followed by the sounds of a one-sided scuffle that, judging by short-lived squeak of dismay, did not end well for Chopper. There came a muffled thump immediately thereafter, as the sound of heavy footfalls stumbled toward the door, making the ruckus even more indistinguishable. Well, I'm awake now. All eyes found themselves glued upon the cabin door seconds before it burst outward, bent at the hinges. Naruto stormed out, covered in bandages, most of which he ripped off by the time he cleared the doorway. Trailing immediately behind him was a distraught Dr. Chopper, doing his best to reattach new bandages, in place of the ones that Naruto continued to burn off of his body. No, you're not awake, Chopper responded, trying in vain to bandage his patient, despite the vehement resistance he received in part for his efforts. You're dreaming. This is all a dream. A dream, I tell you. Now, get back in bed. Never. Naruto snarled fiercely, snatching the gauze off of his cheek when the doctor tried to reapply it. Oh, you're awake, Luffy commented idly, grinning widely shortly thereafter. Good. Now you can tell me how you and Ace met. Huh? Naruto blinked. When did I say that? Robin smiled softly. Naruto saw it. Traitor. Naruto shot her a pleading glance, to which her smile only grew. Arg, fine. He sighed, offering his shoulders in a shrug. In recompense for his temerity. The story won't be any good if I start in the middle, I guess. I suppose I owe you that much. Naruto folded his legs bandaged though they were and plopped himself down at the door to the cabin. He sighed from where he sat as he swept his hand up and through his hair, the blonde mess perfecting itself at the touch of his fingertips. His smile had returned. He leaned forward, resting his hands on his knees as everyone gathered round, as Luffy sat directly in front of him, grinning from ear to ear. Let me tell you a story. Naruto smiled, and when he smiled, it was a slow, sad thing, full of fondness and regret. I'll have to start at the beginning, and it might take some time. Luffy nodded eagerly. So, when did you meet Ace? Naruto chuckled. Well, it all started about 3 years ago. You want me to join your crew? The youth asked in a surprised tone. The Whitebeard Pirates. He was a handsome blue-eyed young man, athletic in his appearance, tall for his age, about 18 years old and spiky blonde hair with fox-like whiskers. He was wearing a strange attire, even for simple island folk. An orange sleeveless vest with red pants and black sandals. Strapped to his back was a long, oblong handle, one that looked almost like a staff, were it not for the wicked, inverse hook into which it tapered off, strongly resembling that of a scythe. A massive weapon wielded, larger than the boy who wielded it. His name was Naruto de Uzumaki. Talking to him was a tall, well-muscled, dark-haired young man of about 20 or so. Unlike the blonde who preferred to dress according to the tropical climate, the most this man wore in the way of clothing was a simple pair of khakis, an orange cowboy hat along with other various baubles, a pair of boots. His name was Portgas Diaz. They stood there on the shore, the waves lapping at their feet, and the edge of the weather-worn path they'd taken toward their destination. Off in the distance, a thin column of smoke rose into the distance, the sign of a residence, of the home of the boy who would one day be known as Burning Will. But for now, Burning Will was just a boy, and a boy who wasn't going to get supper, either for himself or his friend, if they didn't get home soon. Now to Naruto, since the death of Gol D. Roger, the king of pirates, Whitebeard was recognized as the most fearsome force in the world, being the only one able to battle on equal terms with the pirate king himself. Even the Marines and the world government had to respect his power, and must take extreme caution when approaching he who was said to be closest to One Piece, the legendary treasure that Roger had left behind in the New World. Naruto was being offered a position in that man's crew, by none other than the 2nd Division Commander, Fire Fist Ace. So stunned was he not by his friend's rank, position, or status, but rather by his offer that for the moment, the thoughts of supper and a warm bed slipped from his mind with that of the evening sun as it set behind him, casting itself across the sky in a brilliant flare of orange gold. "You want me to join?" Naruto repeated again, slower this time. "The Whitebeard Pirates." "That's right," said Ace. "You're a better fighter than I am. Well, almost as good. You eat as much as I and my little brother used to, although we're not as addicted to ramen as you are. And to be honest with you, I had funny feeling we were destined to meet." Naruto gulped. He'd been thinking the same thing. There was truth in his words. Though Naruto couldn't understand it, even though this was their first meeting, he had strange feeling they had met before, somewhere in the past, perhaps. Perhaps it's the blood in their veins. Perhaps he was just being stupid. Regardless, the spiky-haired youth known as Naruto remained very troubled on what his friend was asking him to do. "Come on, what seems to be the problem, Naruto?" Ace asked. "Well, Ace," Naruto began weakly, "it's just, even if I did want to become a pirate, how do you know Whitebeard will accept me? I'm pretty sure he doesn't accept just anyone on his ship. Least of all me. I'm really not all that special." "Hey, don't worry about Pops," reassured Ace. "Once I tell him about you, especially the part on how you managed to hold your own against me and fight, I'm sure he'll welcome you with open arms, no problem." "I am not so sure about that," Naruto replied with a nervous gulp. "I've heard stories about how Whitebeard shows no mercy to anyone who harms one of his crew. Maybe I'm not cut out for this after all." Ace laughed. "Hey, don't worry about it. If anything, he'll be surprised when he finds out that your godfather is his little brother." "I don't know," Naruto insisted. "I can't just leave without telling I am." In flashback, "Naruto, there is something I need to ask." Robin began slowly, taking him away from his tale. "Something wrong, Robin?" Naruto asked. "Who is I am?" Naruto became hesitant for a moment in response to that question. He recognized the tone in Robin's voice, dense, thick, and deadly. Is it possible she was jealous after having learned of his relationship with Bonnie? Oh no, she knew. He knew that she knew that he knew, just by looking at her, into her eyes. "She's a friend of mine from my hometown," Naruto replied slowly, choosing his words with great care. "Don't worry, whatever it is, it's not what you think." "And what is that I'm thinking?" Robin asked icily. "That I was involved with her," Naruto pointed out. "Seriously, Robin, I am is just a friend of mine." "Is she a pirate?" Usopp asked, curious. "A musician, perhaps?" Brook pressed. No, she's the waitress at her father's restaurant, Ramen Ikaraku." Naruto waved away their curiosity with a flick of his fingers. "Well, she might own the place by now. I haven't been by my hometown for quite some time now." "So she's just some friend you knew at her restaurant?" asked Chopper. "Not just any restaurant," Naruto proclaimed proudly. "The very best ramen restaurant in the world." "Don't be ridiculous," said Sanji as he raised an eyebrow. "What makes you think this restaurant from your hometown is so good?" "It's because Iam's father is greatest ramen maker I ever known," Naruto clarified with something bordering on actual reverence for the dish. "I know because I have tasted his masterpiece. Trust me when I say that nobody makes ramen better than Tuchai." "Tuchai? Yes, that's his name, after all." Naruto answered flatly. What of it? What did you just say? Sanji suddenly asked. I said nobody makes ramen better than Tuchai. Naruto repeated. I won't take back what I said. No, that's not it, Sanji alleged. The name Tuchai you mentioned. Yeah, that's his name, Naruto replied. You know Tuchai? Know him? I heard about him from Zeph. Sanji responded. How long are you going to keep this up? Zeph snapped at Sanji. It isn't my fault, Sanji responded. Of course it is, Zeph retorted. You always beat up an idiot who came in with girls you flirt with. Now thanks to you it's going to take months to repair all the damages that been done to my restaurant, and all because you made a pass on that pirate's girlfriend. You know, I'm kind of glad you didn't meet Tuchai, Zeph responded. Who the hell is Tuchai? Sanji asked. He was my first mate in the Cook Pirates, Zeph explained, sternly, his words solemn. He retired from piracy a few years before I came to the East Blue Sea. He was the best ramen cook I ever had though. Even I could not hope to match his recipe in that regard. What made him so special? Tuchai had a secret ramen cooking recipe that attracts lots of women. That's why, Zeph shot back, suddenly grumpy. There, I told you. Now, leave me be. Say, you wouldn't happen to have any recipes like that, would you? Sanji asked, his eyes blazing with prideful glee. Zeph eyed his protege warily for a moment, mustache twitching, bristling as he stared his student down. It was an impasse. Neither would yield. Neither would break. Not until Sanji's sweat dropped. You don't, do you? Just leave me alone. Zeph sobbed, mournful in despair of his own inadequacy. There's no way. Naruto laughed, slapping his knee. The old coot never told me about that. Huh, so is it true then? Sanji asked, eyes blazing. Can old man Tuchai really produce such a recipe? Dunno. Naruto shrugged. He taught me a bit ... but nothing like that. I think. Why do you mean you think? Huh, bastard. Sanji wailed. You know something, don't you? You're holding out on me, aren't you? Just like Luffy in the Isle of Maidens. I bet you weren't training there at all, were you, Luffy? But I want to hear more about Ace. Luffy whined, eager to learn more about his brother, ignoring the plight of his lovelorn cook. That isn't the end of the story, is it? Sanji, poor Sanji, face-faulted as both the captain and the newest member of the crew ignored him, leaving Chopper to pat the poor person upon the back with one tiny hoof. Naruto watched this and smiled, amused at the camaraderie. I love these guys. Then he chuckled sagely, well aware of the glinting eyes of his captain upon him. You really want to know? Luffy nodded rapidly. All right then. Naruto began dramatically, drawing out his words as Luffy steepled his hands and leaned into them. There I was, torn between leaving the home I'd known for all of my life, and leaving with the great Fire Fist Ace that very day. What an opportunity, what an adventure, the ultimate romance, the ultimate journey. I would have to be a fool to turn it down. This, the ultimate goal that every man aspired to. And, Luffy pressed in eagerly. What did you do? Naruto grinned, and I said, he never got to finish. For scarce had Naruto begun to spin his yarn anew, then a sharp cry of alarm went up from the stern. The moment shattered, but not lost, everyone turned toward it and saw the sudden source of alarm, breaking through the hours of Naruto's peaceful storytelling. What was to happen next would soon prove to be anything but peaceful, as he would soon realize. This was the beginning of everything. Hey, guys, Usopp cried. There's something approaching from 6 o'clock. It's a ship. It's a pirate ship. It's coming straight at us. No sooner had he said it than the ship itself reared up beside them, so close that both coating bubbles brushed against one another. Naruto tried to stand, but a starburst of pain in the back of his head argued for rest, not action. Ugh, perhaps he should have stayed in bed after all. Perhaps he should have done a lot of different things, but now was not the time to be questioning it. Don't use any fire. He heard Nami, saw her from the corner of her peripherals as the opposing ship reared up before them. We don't want to exhaust our oxygen supply. Sure. And then he beheld the giant sea cow pulling the ship. What the fuck? Next time, the legend arrives. Straw Hats and Burning will in Fishman Island. Here's a preview to help tide all you guys and gals over. You probably don't remember me, Burning Will, Caribou snapped. But I remember you. I was just a rookie pirate of the Brotherhood of Kami, the pirate crew which you and that punk Shikamaru Nara wiped out. Brotherhood of Kami, Naruto repeated slowly, his eyes widening. You mean to tell me you're a member of those fanatics? Brotherhood of who? Luffy repeated. What is that? I've heard of them, said Frankie. Based on rumors, those guys are a bunch of nutcases who believe God had empowered them to overthrow the world government. That's right, Caribou agreed with the cyborg. Our leader Hidden formed the group for noble cause in the name of God. Noble cause my ass, Naruto snarled. You bastards came to my hometown, kidnapped I am and sold her into slavery, which she suffered in the world noble's hands at Marieoa. You took the one thing me and my brother had meaning to use in our lives. Caribou snarled at Naruto. I tried stop you and you crushed me like a bug. But now, right now I'm a famous pirate just like you burning will. That's why everyone calls me wet-haired caribou. And I want you remember this face because I'm the guy that's going to kill you. Get in line, Naruto responded tartly. You're not the first one to make that threat, and you'll be the first to die. Caribou cackled. You won't escape from me this time. This time, Naruto frowned. Flames flickered at his fingertips. This time, I won't be merciful. They sat there on the cloak, staring out together into the shadows. Finally, it was Robin who spoke. You love her, don't you? I did love her, he said quietly, though the words tasted like ash in his mouth. She was the love of my life. My love, life, happiness, and inspiration. You don't need to tell me this, Robin murmured. No, I do. He looked at her, his expression grim. There was another woman in my life. Her name was Jewelry Bonnie. I won't lie to you, Robin. I slept with her. I enjoyed it. Hell, I loved it. But I didn't do it to spite you. Never once to spite you. I know. You knew. Yes. And I have regrets, too. He chuckled ruefully. You're talking about Ohara, aren't you? She nodded. I would have done anything to take back that day. Yet I couldn't. I had to go on. Because Luffy needed me. I swallowed my fears. Because Luffy needed me. And when that fear threatened to overwhelm me and destroy the family I'd found, I kept going, despite the fact that everything in my life felt empty, because Luffy needed me. She looked at him again, her eyes sad. For the past 2 years, everything was because Luffy needed me. Naruto nodded. For the past 2 years, everything I've done was because I made a promise to Ace. Sometimes, I feel like I've lost myself along the way, like I don't even know who I am at all under this burning will persona. I'm not even sure that I exist without it. I mean, the day I ate that fruit, the day that I took Ace's powers into myself, I changed. I didn't have the luxury of just sitting on the sidelines after that. And believe me, I tried. You're more than just burning will, Naruto. You're just saying that. Am I? Robin took his hand in her own. Then answer me this. Why do you free slaves? Because it's right. Why did you invade Impel Down? Because I was in danger. Why did you attack Marieoa? I just couldn't let those people suffer like that. Why did you throw yourself at Akainu and Kizaru? To save Luffy. One more question, Robin told him. Then you don't have to say anything else to me if you don't want to. Why are you still here? Because you're here. He heard her breath catch in the dark. Why are you asking me all this? He murmured. We all have our dreams, Naruto. He felt Robin take his hand and she squeezed it. He was drawn to her almost magnetically, and found himself leaning in to give her a tentative kiss. He pulled away only a fraction afterwards. She looked as surprised as he did, though not displeased. Then he leaned in again, more urgently, and their kiss had passion. Naruto felt her breathing against him, and accepted her arms as they closed around his neck when he began to pull away. He wanted this. He wanted to be with a good woman, and forget for just a moment about where they were and what had happened to them. He needed a moment's solace, and he suspected that, while Robin might not need such a thing, she was more than willing to comfort him. Perhaps a bit too willing. Pulling away from the heat of his touch, Robin, lacking any sort of haste whatsoever, tugged at her shirt, releasing the zipper that had tantalizingly constricted her chest for so long. Before Naruto could protest, she pulled at the padded undershirt beneath, sighing with relief as she finally got it off. Naruto hesitated at that. Robin, perhaps we shouldn't. She ignored him, reaching over and undoing the straps that held his vest in place. He seemed pained, struggling with himself despite his obvious desire. But what about the others? I don't care. The look in his eyes turned desperate. But here. He cast his gaze about the cabin, his eyes lingering piteously upon the door jamb and the appalling lack of a lock. Forget where we are. She pulled the vest over his head and he let her, staring helplessly. When it was done, she started working on the straps for his pauldrons, and after a moment's hesitation, he began to help. They tugged and pulled and twisted until they eventually got all that blasted, silly clothing off. She untied his stained and soiled undershirt and removed it, unveiling bare skin. He was covered in cuts and bruises, as no doubt was she. His eyes were locked on her with an intensity that threatened to burn her up. The great Burning Will was a fearsome man, but not all fearsome men were also bad men. Are you certain? He whispered, his breaking husky. There are. Robin hushed him quietly, putting a finger to his lips. He stopped and looked at her with such an ache of loneliness it almost broke her heart. She slowly stroked his cheek. I am tired of pain. So tired. Aren't you? His answer came as he leaned in, his kiss gentle as if he thought her fragile. and then another followed, and then another. He allowed her to pull him toward the bed, leading him by the hand, allowed her hands to snake their way through his hair, to find their way into the waistband of his slacks with an alarming swiftness as he found the clasp of her bra. His thumb stroked the supple skin of her back and breast as he fumbled with and unhooked it. A pair of hands sprouted behind the door and gently closed it shut behind them. She pulled the door shut and locked it behind them. The legend arrives. Straw Hat Luffy and Burning will splash down on Fishman Island. Today all of Fishman Island had gathered to honor the greatest hero they'd ever known, Fisher Tiger. A legendary symbol amongst his kind. Known for his numerous feats and his amazing will, Fisher Tiger had achieved an infamous, some might prefer fearsome, reputation as an adventurer. He was also one of two people who'd made a stand against the discrimination towards fishmen, the other being Queen Ottoheim. According to the tale, Fisher Tiger climbed the Red Line with his bare hands to reach Mera. He decimated the Holy Land, not only freeing his fellow fishmen from the world nobles, but also human slaves and slaves comprising all other races there. With the fishmen slaves he freed, Tiger changed the slave hoof mark branded on himself and them into a symbol of a sun. He took them in as part of his pirate crew, creating the Sun Pirates, the strongest and largest pirate fisherman crew to ever roam the Grand Line. Because of his taboo against the world government, Fisher Tiger was declared an enemy of the state, earning him a bounty of $230 million, an inspiring performance, not only for a fisherman, considering it was his first bounty. After years of being hunted, Fisher Tiger finally met his end during a brutal battle against numerous Marines forces, an exceptional end to an exceptional man. On our hunting. As the story goes, Fisher Tiger was denied a transfusion due to humans' refusal, which would eventually lead to his demise. That was the story of Fisher Tiger, a story that few knew the truth of, a truth that would never be spoken so long as they lived. All of fishmen and merfolks have since admired and looked up to Tiger after his self-sacrificing efforts against humankind. Each year they have held an anniversary, not for his death as some might expect, but rather for the day he first attacked Mera and challenged the world government itself. They would always remember the way he lived, the way he fought for freedom of his race, and the way he had died, fighting to his very last breath. But today, this celebration held a special significance. 2 years ago, on this very day, the day in which Fisher Tiger had first laid siege to Mera, a certain something had happened, something they never thought possible. On the anniversary of this day, the day Fisher Tiger first struck out at the world noble, word reached Fishman Island that Mera had been attacked a second time. "What did you just say?" asked a shocked fishman. "Mera was attacked again." "That's right," his friend replied. "A pirate, a human named Burning will Uzumaki D. Naruto walked right into Mera and burned the place down. He freed all the slaves, just like Tiger, fishmen and merfolk included. He even robbed their treasury and made off with an exorbitant sum of money. It's been years since Fisher Tiger struck. Yet Mera was completely burned to the ground again, only it's a human this time. Impossible. You think that was shocking? That's only the beginning." His friend continued. "Not only did this Naruto guy attack Mera and free thousands of slaves, he did something that was unthinkable, unbelievable, something that even Fisher Tiger would never dare to do. He killed 3 world nobles." "No way." The fishman gasped with incredible shock. "That can't be. I know you'll get an admiral on your tail if you defy a Tenryubito, but killing 1, let alone 3 of them." "Yeah, I know," his colleague agreed in a complete disbelief. Since then all Fishman Island had been obsessed with this stranger who'd aided their kind, who was Burning will Uzumaki D. Naruto. They were aware that he'd inherited the powers of the Mera no Mai, the very same devil fruit that once belonged to the deceased pirate, Fire Fist Ace. They'd heard of how he broken in and broken out of Impel Down, becoming the 3rd man after Shiki the Golden Lion and Monkey D. Luffy to do so. However, he had fought and defeated a Marine admiral, a feat known to be virtually impossible for just about any pirate. Even the community of slavers and slave owners across the Grand Line grew to fear him with absolute terror after they heard what he did to the 3 world nobles. Based on the rumors Fishman Island heard, the 3 Tenryubito had each suffered atrocious and inhuman deaths, the details of which were so grisly that they had to be kept from the world newspapers. Such sheer ruthlessness of killing 3 world nobles in such unspeakable manner has caused some fishmen and merfolk to be dreadful of this Burning will at first. However, former slaves, fishmen, and merfolk that were freed by Burning will soon return to Fishman Island to spread the truth of what kind noble hero Naruto was. "I was there. I saw it all," said a former fishman slave told his story to the crowd. After he freed every slave in Mera, he confronted an army of tens thousands of Marine soldiers, including Marine Admiral Kizaru. He looked at them and gave out a devilish smile. He fought them alone, all by himself in order to allow every single one of us to escape to safety. I heard out about Admiral Kizaru, said one of the listeners in the crowd. He was the one who fought Whitebeard to a standstill in the Battle of Marineford and Dark King Silver's Rayleigh, the former right hand of the Pirate King at Sabayati Archipelago. Yet we read he met his defeat at the hands of Burning Will. This Burning Will is more than just a supernova, added another fishman in the crowd. He's got to be at the least same league of the Yonko or the Shichibukai if he was able to do the impossible and defeat a Marine Admiral single-handedly. Besides the tale of Burning Will's power, there was also a discussion of whether he was truly as ruthless as the world government made him out to be, or if he was the caring, kind, compassionate soul based on the rumors they'd heard. Don't believe everything the world government says about Burning Will Uzumaki D. Naruto, said a young woman in a strong tone. They're only protecting the bastard noble that's been abusing and oppressing me at Mariewa, along with many others. T. Terumi-san. Mei Terumi was a red snapper mermaid, tremendously beautiful with red hair and light green eyes. Dark blue polish adorned her fingers and lips, and gorgeous body with an exquisite blue dress. Right now she was talking to the mermaids at Mermaid Coven, who was very happy to learn she was alive and well. They had learned she was kidnapped by slavers during the time Fishman Island lost its protection due death of Whitebeard and sold as slave to the world noble. The proof of her abduction could be spotted in the hated slave tattoo located just above her large breasts. What was it like up there? Asked Ishili, one of the dark-haired mermaids. It was hell, Mei Terumi said bitterly, as if she doesn't want to talk about it. Those damn world nobles wasn't human, for they give all humanity a bad name. They had done things to me that was disgusting, things I don't want to talk about. I thought it will never end, and prayed every day for death. Yet instead of the death that I prayed for, Mei Terumi kept on with her story. Heaven sent in a savior named Burning Will Uzumaki D. Naruto. He killed the world noble that owned and enslaved me, along with many others. I know this because I saw how he killed the world noble with my own eyes. Was it scary? Asked the Medaka mermaid quintuplets, the 5 tiny young mermaids. I was afraid of him at first, Mei Terumi said truthfully. But seeing the death of that world noble that abused for so long gave me a satisfaction I thought I never dreamed to experience in those last 10 mouths as a slave. I heard that Burning will rob nearly the entire world noble's treasure wealth, said Madame Shirley, the manager of Mermaid Cafe. She was known to be the younger sister of Arlong and a prophetess that has the ability to see the future. She was Mei Terumi's best friend since childhood. Is that true as the rumors said? That he did surely, Mei Terumi admitted. But strangely, he gave every single slave that he freed an enormously sum of money, stolen from the world nobles. Right now he gave me $850 million. You're kidding me, right? Said a white-haired young man. He gave away all that money just like that. Everyone in the room knows who him. He was Suigetsu, one of the Hazuki brothers, also dear nephews of Madame Shirley. He and his elder brother Mangetsu were half-breeds, born to be half humans and half fishmen. Yet despite their half-breed heritage, they were also former pirates, having once served under Zabuza Mamachi, the greatly infamous demon of the mist, another half-breed. Before his unfortunate demise, their captain had held a $300 million bounty on his head and was Madame Shirley's lover. After the death of their captain and mentor, the Hazuki brothers had returned to Fishman Island to work as bouncers at their aunt's Mermaid Cafe. A real pirate would be insane to do something like that, Suigetsu scoffed. This Burning Will could have used the wealth stolen from the world nobles to fill up the empty Yonko position that was once ceded by Whitebeard. Suigetsu, it doesn't matter what you think of Burning Will, Mei Terumi responded harshly. All I know is that Burning Will is the greatest man I ever met, standing up to those disgusting world nobles and giving away all that money to us former slaves. If I ever see him again, Mei Terumi, I'm going to give him the best kiss he's ever had. But not all were celebrating on this honored day. What the hell did you just say? Hody Jones angrily demanded. Inari didn't see Hody Jones was behind him, didn't recognize his shadow until it was too late. Much too late. Before he could run, Hody grabbed him by the head, lifting him from the ground, high in the air. I want you take it back, you brat. Hody Jones snarled, bringing his angry face close to Inari's. I want you to eat every single word you just said from your mouth. No, I won't, Inari cried. Burning Will Uzumaki D. Naruto is hero. Burning Will Uzumaki D. Naruto is a human, part of that garbage that clings to surface world. Hody responded harshly. He's not Fisher Tiger's heir. Oh yes he is, Inari shot back. Grandpa and Kaiza told me that Fisher Tiger is the greatest thing the world has to offer, and Burning Will is his heir because he freed the slaves and attacked. Don't make any angrier as your grandfather already did, you little brat. Hody responded angrily, seething. If you don't take back those words, I'm going to. Hody. Hearing his name, Hody turned to his left and see Kaiza, the boy's stepfather, confronting him. Standing at his side was his wife Tsunami and father-in-law Tazuna. "Let go of my son this instant, Hody," Kaiza demanded. "You mean stepson?" Hody sneered. "Afraid I can't do that, Kaiza. This little punk needs to be taught a lesson he'll never forget." "So what?" Kaiza responded. "Back when we were kids, we used to praise his Fisher Tiger's deeds. It's no different than what Inari was doing. The difference is that this little punk did the unthinkable," Hody snapped. He called burning will the heir of Fisher Tiger's unconquerable willpower against slavery and the world nobles, and that is something I will not allow. Meanwhile, with the Straw Hats, many meters below the sea floor, Uzumaki Naruto sneezed. Again. That was the third time he'd sneezed today. Was someone talking about him somewhere, or was he falling ill from the after effects of the Amaterasu? He certainly hoped that it was the former instead of the latter. "Geez, I hope I'm not catching a cold." Then he remembered what he'd been staring. The cow. He was staring at a giant sea cow, bound by a thick leather harness to the offending ship. The creature stared down at them and the Straw Hats stared back. Apparently some of them knew this creature, for they'd been pointing and exchanging glances for some time now, much to Naruto's amusement. "Geez, these kids really got around, didn't they? You're Momu from the Arlong Pirates, aren't you?" Nami blinked. "Do you recognize me?" The sea cow twitched. Sanji frowned. "We've seen this guy before, right, Luffy?" "Have we?" Luffy asked. The cow trembled. "Eh?" Naruto squinted upward at the beast. "You know this critter?" "You could say that." Nami shrugged. A look of sheer and utter horror flashed through the eyes of the beast. Comprehension dawned in those glassy orbs of black and white, and it quivered, almost as if it actually feared the gaggle of pirates standing below. Sheer, primordial terror quivered through its frame as its eyes beheld the four original Straw Hats who had already inflicted such grievous trauma upon it once before. Follow after me, Mian." One of the invaders cackled as he leapt on board the Thousand Sunny. "Ah," Chopper cried. "Someone's come on board our ship." "Tahahihi." The sinister-looking pirate cackled, heedless of this fact. "While these guys are busy staring dumbfounded, we'll slaughter every last man on the ship. Starting with you, Burning. I will finally have my revenge." Who are you again?" Naruto asked. "You probably don't remember me, Burning Will," Caribou snapped. "But I remember you. I was just a rookie pirate of the Brotherhood of Kami, the pirate crew which you and that punk Shikamaru Nara wiped out. Don't think I've forgotten. Don't think I've forgiven you." "Brotherhood of Kami," Naruto repeated slowly, his eyes widening. "You mean to tell me you're a member of those fanatics?" "Brotherhood of who?" Luffy repeated. "What is that?" "I've heard of them," said Frankie. "Based on the rumors, those guys are a bunch of nutcases who believe God had empowered them to overthrow the world government. They were led by some nutjob who believed himself to be God's holy messenger or something." "That's right," Caribou agreed with the cyborg. "Our leader Hidden formed our group for that noble cause in the name of God." "Noble cause my ass," Naruto snarled. "You bastards came to my hometown, kidnapped Iam, sold her into slavery, and made her suffer at the hands of the world nobles in Marieoa. If that's what you call noble, then you're seriously fucked up. You took the one thing that had meaning to me in my life." Caribou snarled at Naruto. "I tried to stop you and you crushed me like a bug. But Nuo, right now I'm a famous pirate just like you, Burning Will. That's why everyone calls me Wet-Haired Caribou. And I want you to remember this face because it's the last thing you're ever going to see is me and my slaughter you and everything you hold dear." "Get in line," Naruto replied tartly. "You're not the first one to make that threat, and you'll be the first to die." Caribou cackled. "You won't escape from me this time." "This time," Naruto frowned suddenly. Flames flickered at his fingertips. "This time, I won't be merciful." Amaterasu. Naruto's eyes widened as great gout of black flame burst into existence upon the sea cow's back. An instant later and another speck had joined the first, followed by a third, a fourth and fifth, and a sixth as the inexorable blackness began to spread. Stretching its hungry tongues across the great galleon, it soon found the haunches of the beast as easily as a newborn would a bottle. MOOH. By this point, the Momu was utterly terrified. It couldn't bear to be in the presence of those two horrifying humans for a single second. Not an instant longer. Ship and all, it sped away, leaving a strutting Caribou and a dumbfounded Straw Hat crew in its wake. Its captors tried to steer it back, but the sea beast would have none of it. The flames upon its back refused to be extinguished by the water, and, unhindered, they licked across deck and crew alike. "MOOO," the sea cow cried, swimming away from the dreaded ship and these terrible pirates as fast as its flippers could carry it. much to the dismay of Caribou's crew, as they realized that their captain was not only trapped aboard the Thousand Sunny with the entire Straw crew, he was also trapped aboard with Burning Will, one of the deadly supernovas that so piously burned Mera to the ground. Now he was burning them, and their ship, to ashes, even as they tried to outrace the flames clinging to their very flesh. What's wrong, Burning Will? Caribou cackled. Can it be that you've finally come to fear my reputation? The Straw Hats continued to stare, stupefied, as the newcomer continued to rant about he and his crew would slowly kill Burning Will, all the while completely unaware that he no longer had a crew or a ship for that matter to back him up. By the time Caribou realized that something was amiss, by the time he looked over his shoulder and realized it, that his ship was gone, it was already too late. Much too late. Before Caribou could say anything, before anyone could stop him, Naruto had unsheathed his sword. With little more than a whisper he swept forward, bringing the blade down in a smooth vertical haki-imbued cut meant to bifurcate the unfortunate rookie standing below him. At the very last instant a hand rested his blade to the side. Hard, Caribou sagged, his eyes rolling back into his head and exposing the whites of his sclere. Naruto followed this up with a secondary strike, driving the now impotent captain to the deck and pinning him there. The legendary blade bit into flesh and sinew and bone as it found Caribou's right arm. And still, the pirate did not stir. Naruto nodded to him and removed the katana, swooping over his head and toward his back where it landed in its sheath with an audible thunk. He dabbed at his eyes as they began to bleed, and, to his credit, staggered only slightly. He'll be out for a while, Burning Will pointed out pleasantly, ignoring the looks of shock and dismay everyone gave him. Now, shall I continue the story? He'd just burned a ship to a crisp beneath the waves, setting fire to an entire galleon as though it were nothing. This was the power of the Mera no Mai at its finest. The ability to devour all, whether it be on land or sea or sky, to wreathe the world in black flames of death and destruction. I'm glad he's on our side. Nami swallowed nervously. Well, Luffy, Naruto asked, pointedly avoiding the navigator's stare. Would you like me to continue? Yes. Luffy grinned exuberantly. Tell me more about Ace. Naruto did just that. Dear Naruto, by the time you get this letter it means that I'll finally catch up to Teach. He and his so-called crew are located at some Banero island. They're not aware that I'm onto their position, but they soon will be once I confront them. I just want you to know once I've taken care of Teach, I'll be back in Leaf Island to pick you up. I hope you've finished your haki lessons with Jiraiya, because I can't wait to show you how great the world is. We're going to have one hell of a good time, you and me. There are places I can't wait to show you, such as Fishman Island. And people I can't wait to introduce you to, like Pops and Marco. Like I said before, Naruto, I felt like it was fate that you and I should meet. I realized how obsessed I was with chasing Teach when he killed Thatch. I guess one good thing that came out of it was meeting you. The way we've hung out with each other kinda reminded me of my little brother, Luffy. Take care Naruto, we'll see each other soon. We're going to turn the world upside down, you and I. From your best friend, future crewmate and captain, Porcas the Ace. Naruto handed the letter to Luffy with a dour expression. And that's where the story ends, I'm afraid. Luffy gingerly accepted the letter. His eyes glistened. Here were the last words of his brother. The last words before everything had gone so wrong. Damn that Akainu. He held onto it for several more seconds, his hands fisting against the weathered parchment as Naruto and crew looked on. Gingerly, he forced his hands to relax. With great care, he began folding it upon itself and placed it in the sash of his hat. Ace, he was a good man, Luffy, Naruto said. He spoke of you often. Luffy nodded numbly. You kinda remind me of him. Naruto blushed, so taken aback was he by this statement. He seemed to consider it for a moment. I guess you could say we were cut from the same cloth, the two of us. Another nod of numbness. The letter, though not addressed to him, brought back memories. Painful ones. He'd fought so hard to bring back his brother, only to fail. He'd lost his brother, and that wound, along with the one on his chest, would never truly heal. But he still had his nakama, his friends, and now he had Naruto, who reminded him so very much of his big brother it was almost scary. It would fulfill his dream, not just for his sake, but for that of Ace. Without him, he would have died long ago. He owed it to him. He owed it to his brother to continue on and live a proud, carefree life. He owed his brother that, and he would see to it that he lived up to it. The letter had not shaken his resolve in the slightest. Not at all. Instead, it had served to strengthen it. He would press on and push forward, no matter what. Caribou wailed when he came to, when he found that Frankie was about to hurl him over the rail. Don't throw me into the sea. Anything but that. Anything. That's something you shouldn't do. You have to value people's life, you know. God is watching over you. Don't you think so? His sudden change in personality was met with scorn and disgust from Naruto. And you call yourself a pirate? The blonde growled. Throw him in the sea and be done with him, Frankie. He deserves death and nothing less. Can't you just kill him? Zoro sighed. Nope. Naruto yawned, resheathing his blade as he did so. I don't feel like killing him anymore. Is that because Robin told you not to? Chopper asked pointedly. Urusai. Nami shook her head. Just what kind of connection did Robin have with their newest nakama? Naruto seemed unusually docile around her. For the bloodthirsty burning will to actually be cowed by a woman no less bespoke of whatever relationship the two might have had in the past. Robin had also vouched for him, when she rarely spoke up on the behalf of anyone, even herself. No, it couldn't be. She wasn't. Jealous was she? Something wrong? Nami, you should put on a coat too, Naruto. Naruto grinned widely. I don't need a coat, Nami-san. As if in reminder, he conjured a small flame between his fingertips. See? The navigator swung around, a half-assed retort already formed on her lips. It was a mistake. The instant her eyes met his, she realized he hadn't meant anything by it. It was just a simple, harmless comment. Gah, why couldn't she look at him without feeling all hot and bothered? What was it about him that set her blood boiling so? And why, for the love of all creation, couldn't she bring herself to stop thinking about him? Maybe. Foo, that's not fair. Chopper interrupted loudly, crying through chattering teeth. You're a human furnace. Nami, tell Naruto to share. Robin smiled softly from where she sat upon the railing. Come to think of it, I'm not cold, either. That's because you're close to Naruto. I suppose so. Robin didn't stop smiling as she looped an arm within that of the infamous rookie. Naruto felt his cheeks darken, swelling into a scalding shade of scarlet. Blast the woman. She knew just how to get under his skin. Literally. Not that he minded. Robin set him at ease, in a way he'd never been before. Perhaps that was because of their past relationship in Alabasta, brief though it had been. Our Robin, Yosh, Luffy declared. Everyone huddled around Naruto. Hey, Naruto cried out. You're all hopeless. Nami shrieked. I hope the ghosts get you. GG ghosts. Naruto gawped. No one said anything about ghosts. Arg. Nami flung her hands up in exasperation. Now he wants to license. Before them lay the downward current. Only it wasn't a current at all. Rather, it resembled a massive undersea waterfall the likes of which they'd never seen. Fish, water, and even the ship itself, it was gradually drawing them in, dragging everything down to the depths below. And below the depths, something was stirring. Something large, massive and monstrous. A creature as ancient as time itself, and 10 times as large. Naruto saw it first. Great, writhing tentacles, coiling around crushed ships upon the floor. Twin, bulbous eyes, leering up at them in defiance of their passage. A body twice the size of a squid and with an appetite to match. It roared up at them, bearing its many coils in an unspoken challenge. Kraken, Luffy, unlike the rest of his crew, felt no fear. Or if he did, he certainly did nothing to show it. I've decided. I'm going to make him my pet. Here to tide you kid is over, is a long and epic preview. Enjoy. Naruto awoke with a start. The last thing he remembered was the passing through the bubble, being swept up in the water, spiraling out of control. The door to the room swung open suddenly, startling him. Robin. Naruto blinked. They sat there on the cloak, staring out together into the shadows. Finally, it was Robin who spoke. You love her, don't you? I did love her, he said quietly, though the words tasted like ash in his mouth. She was the love of my life. My love, life, happiness, and inspiration. I loved her, Robin, and I don't know what I'm going to do without her. You don't need to tell me this, Robin murmured. No, I do. He looked at her, his expression grim. There was another woman in my life. Her name was Jewelry Bonnie. I won't lie to you, Robin. I slept with her. I enjoyed it. Hell, I loved it. But I never did it to spite you. Never once to spite you. Not a one. I know. You knew. Yes. And I have regrets, too. He chuckled ruefully. You're talking about Ohara, aren't you? She nodded. I would have done anything to take back that day. Yet I couldn't. I had to go on. Because Luffy needed me. I swallowed my fears. Because Luffy needed me. And when that fear threatened to overwhelm me and destroy the family I'd found, I kept going, despite the fact that everything in my life felt empty, because Luffy needed me. She looked at him again, her eyes sad. For the past 2 years, everything was because Luffy needed me. Naruto nodded. For the past 2 years, everything I've done was because I made a promise to Ace. Sometimes, I feel like I've lost myself along the way. Like I don't even know who I am at all under this burning will persona. I'm not even sure that I exist without it. I mean, the day I ate the fruit, the day that I took Ace's powers into myself, I changed. I didn't have the luxury of just sitting on the sidelines after that. And believe me, I tried. You're more than just burning will, Naruto. And you're just saying that. Am I? Robin studied him in the blackness, her eyes suddenly piercing. Then tell me this. Why do you free slaves? Because, well, because it's right. Why did you invade Impel Down? Because I was in danger. Why did you attack Mera? I just couldn't let those people suffer like that. Why did you throw yourself at Akainu and Kizaru? To save Luffy. One more question. Robin told him. Then you don't have to say anything else to me if you don't want to. Why are you still here? She asked. Naruto glanced at her sideways. Because you're here. He heard her breath catch in the dark. Why are you asking me all this? He murmured. We all have our dreams, Naruto. Robin said. You have yours and I have mine. He felt Robin take his hand and she squeezed it. He was drawn to her almost magnetically, and found himself leaning in to give her a tentative kiss. He pulled away only a fraction afterwards. She looked as surprised as he did, though not displeased. Then he leaned in again, more urgently, and their kiss had passion. Naruto felt her breathing against him, and accepted her arms as they closed around his neck when he began to pull away. He wanted this. He wanted to be with a good woman, and forget for just a moment about where they were and what had happened to them. He needed a moment's solace, and he suspected that, while Robin might not need such a thing, she was more than willing to comfort him. Perhaps a bit too willing. Pulling away from the heat of his touch, Robin, lacking any sort of haste whatsoever, tugged at her shirt, releasing the zipper that had tantalizingly constricted her chest for so long. Before Naruto could protest, she pulled at the padded undershirt beneath, sighing with relief as she finally got it off. Naruto hesitated at that. Robin, perhaps we shouldn't. She ignored him, reaching over and undoing the straps that held his vest in place. He seemed pained, struggling with himself despite his obvious desire. But what about the others? I don't care. The look in his eyes turned desperate. But here. He cast his gaze about the cabin, his eyes lingering piteously upon the door jamb and the appalling lack of a lock. Forget where we are. She pulled the vest over his head and he let her, staring helplessly. When it was done, she started working on the straps for his pauldrons, and after a moment's hesitation, he began to help. They tugged and pulled and twisted until they eventually got all that blasted, silly clothing off. She untied his stained and soiled undershirt and removed it, unveiling bare skin. He was covered in cuts and bruises, as no doubt was she. His eyes were locked on her with an intensity that threatened to burn her up. The great Burning Will was a fearsome man, but not all fearsome men were also bad men. Are you certain? He whispered, his breaking husky. There are. Shhhhhh. Robin hushed him quietly, putting a finger to his lips. He stopped and looked at her with such an ache of loneliness it almost broke her heart. She slowly stroked his cheek. I am tired of pain. So tired. Aren't you? His answer came as he leaned in, his kiss gentle as if he thought her fragile. And then another followed, and then another. He allowed her to pull him toward the bed, leading him by the hand, allowed her hands to snake their way through his hair, to find their way into the waistband of his slacks with an alarming swiftness as he found the clasp of her bra. His thumbs stroked the supple skin of her back and breast as he fumbled with and unhooked it. A pair of hands sprouted behind the door and gently closed it shut behind them. She pulled the door shut and locked it behind them. Naruto. Naruto. Robin spoke, more insistently. Wake up. And then his eyes snapped open. Naruto blinked, his eyes opening and closing with an infinite slowness. He was awake. Or was he? He'd already awoken once before, and that had been a dream. Who was to say then that he was not dreaming now? As the world swam into focus, he found he was not lip-locked, not with Nico Robin as he'd initially surmised, but with a green-haired mermaid, with the latter appearing to enjoy said kiss quite a bit, and belatedly realized just what he'd been doing. A mermaid. He'd seen a few mermaids in Marieoa, but never this one. He'd been dreaming. It wasn't that she wasn't beautiful. She was. She just wasn't Nico Robin. Gah, Naruto yelped, immediately lurching back. Oi, team, since when the hell do you kiss people in your sleep? Sanji hollered back. You didn't come in through the main entrance, did you? One of them asked. Are your friends all right now? Inquired another. Those pirates who drowned. The legal entry, squealed a third. How wild. I love pirates. Hello, chimed a fourth. Say, they don't look too scary. Everyone, Kami began. This is the captain, Luffy Chin. The crying one is Sanji Chin. The big-nosed one is Usopp Chin. The tanuki one is Chopper Chin. And the other blonde one call himself, She turned toward Naruto, frowning. Ono ... What did you say your title was again? Naruto Chin. Naruto. The silence was deafening. The Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto's sweat dropped. Hello. Oh my gosh. One of the mermaids cried aloud. It's him. Look girls. Over here. It's really him. He's really here. Naruto blinked in surprise as all eyes in the Mermaid Cove fell upon him. It was overwhelming. both wonderful and terrifying at the same time. Damn, he should have expected this. He'd freed all those slaves from Mera after all, a feat that only one of their own, Fisher Tiger, could hope to boast of. And he was long since dead. That Naruto had done so, freed all the slaves on the anniversary of Fisher Tiger's death, had been purely accidental. The repercussion of such an action hadn't even occurred to him until just now. You are who we think you are, aren't you? One of them asked. Naruto's sweat dropped. Well, yes, I'd like to think I know who I am. Burning Will. Gently, he eased himself into the shallows, stopping only once the water nearly reached his waist. This is as far in as I can go, I'm afraid. Naruto cocked his head fractionally. A slow smile spread across his face, because an idea was already forming in the back of his mind. If he truly was seen as a hero here, then perhaps they might be able to get away with this after all. We might not have to hide, actually, he began softly. And you are. Greetings. Naruto stepped forward, his hand raised peaceably. You are the prince's, I take it. Take a good long look at my face, Naruto stated sternly. Do you honestly think I would harm any of the fair maidens residing here? The whole of the Mermaid Cove swooned before his words. Naruto-kun. Had we known of the main entrance, we would have taken that route. As it was, a number of pirates forced our hand. She was a red snapper mermaid, and she was as beautiful as she was lovely. A beautiful woman with flame-colored curls, dressed in a simple low-cut blue dress. She was the only occupant of the cafe. Her shirt was half zipped down her body, and only her voluminous hair and a thin brassiere stood between her bulging breasts and the open air of the cafe. She looked up at their approach with eyes so incredibly green Naruto couldn't look away. She waited patiently as the blonde struggled to regain control over himself, his eyes, his mind, and still she peered at him, staring with wide orbs of brilliant jade hidden behind the bright orange tresses of her hair. Hello, handsome. When she spoke, her voice was everything a man might expect it to be. Low, sultry, full of warmth and amusement, sprinkled with the faintest trace of the deepest, darkest desire known to mankind. But of the straw hats that had entered the Mermaid Cafe, she only had eyes and words for one of them. Bypassing a stricken Sanji and Usopp, she glided across the cafe, coming to a halt before Naruto. She paused, tilting her head as she regarded him amidst the silence. She reached out and silently ran a slender finger from his exposed bandages up along his chest. His skin shuddered and shivered where she touched, and he gulped. It was the only sound, save for that of his own breath. Hello to you too, May. Naruto stammered, suddenly nervous in the presence of this buxom beauty. How have you been? I'm much better now that you're finally here. The mermaid all but purred, her eyes never leaving his, not even for a moment. Much better. Naruto laughed nervously. Is that so? It is. Their faces were only inches apart. Naruto was breathing heavily, every breath wafting past his lips in a thick cloud of steam, and he was beginning to regret his decision to forego his cloak, but still couldn't bring himself to look away from her. Even her smell was intoxicating, like a rare flower that only bloomed in the darkest gardens. Despite all the time that she must have spent in that cafe, she was enticing and sweet without being cloying. Then the mermaid known as May smiled. Ah, yes, I promised my hero a kiss, didn't I? She winked seductively as Burning Will flushed from head to toe. How rude of me to have forgotten. How terribly, terribly rude of me. I thought you might have forgotten all about that silly little promise of mine. But, here you are. If it's a kiss you came here for, you needed only to ask. She wore a subtle expression of amusement on her face as she returned his disbelieving gaze, her grin turning slightly devious as she leaned in and pressed her lips to his. Naruto's mind exploded into white as he tasted her tongue over his, just for a moment. In that instant, with every fiber of his being, he willed himself to stand fast. He failed, and miserably at that. His arms took control, spreading themselves across her back. He was so completely taken aback by her kiss that he hardly noticed when his left hand began to cup her firm ass and his right palm took up residence on her jaw. He deepened the kiss as he pressed his body against hers, pushing her back against the nearest wall. Her hands were just as explorative, her nimble fingertips running along his chest and stomach. What the hell am I doing? Gasping, he tore himself away from her. Oh my, May smiled. If you boys want to a pick fight with him, then be my guest. May Terumi mocked the new fishman pirates. But I should warn you boys, this is no ordinary pirate or human that you're about to face. Oh really? Hammond snarled. And who might this weakling human be? I can't believe a racist moron like you doesn't know who this is. May Terumi smiled as she looped an arm within the blonde's. This is Burning Will Uzumaki D. Naruto. The silence was deafening. BBB Burning Will. Naruto grinned ferociously. Long time no see, Hammond. Now Hody Jones and his lieutenants were very surprised that the monster of the sea had come to visit. Just few months ago, Hody Jones had attempted to recruit Kasama Hoshigaki into the new Fishman Pirates. No one had seen him in many years since the disbanding of the Sun Pirates. Showing up from out nowhere was a big surprise and chance for Hody to recruit Kasama on his side. When Fisher Tiger was alive, Kasama had been regarded as among the most powerful members of the Sun Pirates. Even among fishmen, his physical strength was considered monstrous and a fearsome master of fishman karate alongside Jin. In addition, Kasama was the wielder of the same hata, a mysterious and powerful sword said to be both alive and capable of its own will. Kasama held a dangerous reputation among the Grand Line's most famous pirates. For example, Kasama had fought a fierce battle with Dracula Hawkeye's Mihawk, a member of the Shichibukai, and the current holder of the title, greatest swordsman in the world, in equal measures. Another example of Kasama's strength is that he once wiped out 100 marine warships in mere moments and nearly killed Admiral Aokichi. Having the monster of the sea on their side was guaranteed that Ryugu Kingdom will fallen. However, Kasama refused the offer to join the new Fishman Pirates. He insulted Hody and his lieutenants, calling them addicted kids who weren't worth his time. He also insulted them further of lacking Fisher Tiger's spirit. For Hody, he would have killed Kasama for that insult. However, he didn't do a fear of the monster of the sea's power. He had promised himself after King Neptune and his family was taken care of him, he was going to deal with Kasama personally. "What are you doing here, Kasama?" Hody asked coldly. "I thought you didn't want to join the new Fishman Pirates." Kasama looked at Hody as if he were a child pretending to be a man. Then he spoke. "I'm here because I've made a decision. I've decided to join your little band of addicts to overthrow the Ryugu Kingdom." This seems to surprise Hody and his lieutenants. They knew Kasama held no love or respect for them and they began to grow suspicious of his motives. "You're joking," replied Zio. "You really want to know?" Kasama responded with a wicked smile. "Yeah," Dawson demanded. "You think we're just going to let you in our crew just like that? You embarrassed us and now you won't join us." Daruma snarled. "Gives us one good reason to even consider letting you in our crew." "Well, one thing's for sure," Kasama chortled softly. "I do know that the Straw Hat Pirates are here on Fishman Island. No one's seen them in 2 years and I've no doubt in my mind that their strength now rivals even that of the strongest New World pirates." "We know that the Straw Hat Pirates are here on Fishman Island," Hody responded. "And despite their reputation, they're still just weakling humans to deal with. Even burning will use Uzumaki to Naruto." Kasama sneered. The very mention of the name seems caused some of Hody's officers to grow nervous as they noticed the dark rage covering their captain's face. "You better watch yourself, old man," Hody growled in a dangerous tone. "I don't care if you're among the most dangerous pirates in the Grand Line. You say that name again and I won't hesitate to kill you." Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. And comment down your opinion on this video. Thanks for stopping by and I'll see you in the next one.